gonna be real honest with you. If I hear something running at me and I can't see it, I am packing my things and moving immediately. So with that being said, let's jump right into tonight's story. So grab your favorite tea and settle in, and let me tell you another scary story, because of course, this is Tea After Midnight. This story comes from Kay. Hi Savannah, I'm a huge fan of your TikTok series, and I figured I would share some stories of my own. This is going to be a long email with multiple stories, so feel free to break these up. I really hope you post about them because I'm curious what everyone thinks is going on within my house. I grew up in a historic neighborhood in Ohio. My house is 101 years old, and I'm typing this email sitting in the living room of said home. Growing up, I always had uncomfortable feelings at night, but never noticed anything crazy. That is, until I was in 6th or 7th grade. I distinctly remember being home alone, watching TV with my dog snoring next to me on the couch. It was a snowy evening, and it's worth noting that we have bells tied to the back door, so when the dog wants out, she can ring them. Suddenly, I heard the bells ringing frantically. Mind you, my dog is right next to me. Then I heard footsteps leading into the kitchen and the distinct sound of the pantry door slamming shut. I am so scared that I think someone broke into our house. I grab a pair of scissors and run to hide. When my parents came home, they found me hiding, and I explained everything. My dad went to check on the door I assumed the intruder came in through, and what he said next was terrifying. Kay, there's no footprints in the snow. I ended up assuming my imagination was running wild because I enjoyed watching spooky shows. However, one day a few years later, I asked my sister when we were home alone if she ever noticed anything unusual about our house. I was not prepared for what she told me. The first thing she did was tell me to be quiet and that we should go get food. On the way to the restaurant, she told me that we can never speak about the things that happen while we were actively in the house. She said she always noticed that things get worse after she does. She then went on to tell me a few of the creepy things that have happened to her. I am going to directly quote from a submission she sent to another online spooky storyteller. Let me start off by saying I'm not sure if my house is haunted or just a place where things pass through ever so often. I have distinct memories of my childhood of blinds shooting closed on their own and periods of time where things were normal. The biggest and spookiest set of ghost happenings happened about 4, now 5 years ago, during my senior year of high school. It started when I was up late working on a school project. My twin brother came to tell me he was going to bed, and he walked out of the kitchen where I was. A few minutes later, I heard the distinct sound of the footrest of the recliner being snapped down. I assumed it was my brother and that he had sat down for a sec. I go and check, and yep, he went to bed 10 minutes prior to when he told me. I assumed if I didn't address it, it would just stop, right? Wrong. The next week, I'm at the side door waiting to walk out to the car, where my brother was waiting to go meet my parents for dinner. As I open the door, I hear something sprinting through the kitchen towards me. I make terrified eye contact with my brother that clearly conveyed my inner monologue of fear that an invisible boogeyman was about to run me down. I finally came to my senses and slammed the house door. Some time passes and it's now the very end of October if my memory serves me correctly. Buckle up because this is where it gets real. I need to describe what the layout of our house is like for you to properly visualize what comes next. Our kitchen has a back staircase that links up to the main staircase. It's super steep and runs right up to the dishwasher so we don't use it. It's just storage space where we keep kitchen appliances and beverages. The base of those stairs is directly adjacent to the countertop that has the dishwasher, the oven, and the sink. So I'm at the sink washing some pans from dinner late at night. I'm the last one awake. Out of my peripheral vision to my left, I can clearly see that staircase. I see a very clear shadow figure bent down with its hands on its knees, head cocked all the way to the side, staring at me. Well, I was not cooled by being perceived by this spooky figure. I turned to confirm what I was seeing, and it's gone. I know this wasn't a trick of the light because this was a solid figure. I was so sure that I thought for a fact one of my siblings was playing a prank on me, but now there was nothing there. Weirdly enough, after that, everything stopped for a while. My younger sister, me, who's sending this email, started to experience things though, like her foot being yanked while sleeping at night after I went away to college. I try not to think about that when I go home and sleep in our shared room. She mentioned my foot being grabbed at night in her story, so the next story I'm going to tell you was around my sophomore year of high school. I was up late into the night after my parents had went to bed. Suddenly, I heard the distinct sound of metal scraping across the kitchen floor. Me being the first to debunk things, I went into the kitchen and found my dog's water bowl across the kitchen from where it usually is. Thinking it was just my dog who pushed it, which she has never done, I called her name. She ran downstairs, meaning that she was upstairs with my parents the whole time. I was so spooked that I called my sister and told her what happened. It is also worth noting that this is the same dog that would stare into empty corners in our house and growl. The final story I will tell you is the most recent encounter I've had. 2 years ago, I was up late again playing video games with my friends. It was around Christmas time, so we had our Christmas tree up. To turn on the Christmas tree lights, you have to step on this little red button. I found one online in case you're confused by that description. I was going to go to bed, so I went to turn the lights off. When you step on it, it makes a very distinct click. I stepped on it, it clicked, and the lights turned off. I turned to walk away, and about 5 steps away, I heard click. Scared out of my mind, I turned around, and sure enough, the Christmas tree was turned right back on. I turned the lights back off and ran upstairs to bed. I agree with my sister that things aren't consistent in happening. My dad is skeptical about our house being haunted. However, even he has a story where he thought he saw a figure lying on our couch at night before realizing everyone in the house was upstairs. I have never told my sister my theory about why things only really seem to happen consistently to us. Things only happen to my sister at first. However, when she started being out of the house more often during high school and eventually moved away for college, it seemed as if it moved on to me. Things then only happened to me. I am now moved out for college and am not home nearly enough to notice anything crazy. However, I will say whenever I'm on the phone with friends telling these stories, I usually hear a loud bang coming from somewhere inside the house. Rule number 1, don't speak about what happens while being inside the house. Kay, I do want to say that I definitely think your house is haunted. There are just too many things that have happened to you guys that can't just be explained away. I think the scariest part to me, like I said, was something running at your sister, and she couldn't see it. She could hear it physically running after her, but she couldn't see it. That freaks me out so bad. So the other part that really freaked me out was the Christmas tree. I could literally not imagine clicking it to turn it off, and as you're walking away, you hear it click, and then the lights come back on. I don't know what I would have done in that moment, but it would have absolutely sent shivers down my spine, because that is so scary to think you're walking away after clicking it off, walking away, and you hear a click. I would have froze and not been able to turn around. Oh, I almost forgot about the part where the shadow figure was on the stairs. Just kidding, I think that is the scariest part to me. She's standing there doing dishes. Okay, picture it, you're standing there doing dishes. Out of your peripheral, you see a shadow figure. You're looking at a shadow figure that's bent down, its hands were on its knees, its neck was bent crooked, looking at her. Absolutely not. No. But Kay, thank you so much for sending in your story. I really do hate that you guys have been going through this, and luckily now that you're off to college and your sister's moved out too, hopefully it kind of settles down and you guys don't have to deal with that anymore. But it is very, very strange, and anybody in the comments, if you have any idea what this could be or why it sticks in the kitchen, please let us know. But that does conclude this episode of Tea After Midnight. If you have any personal scary stories you want to share, I would love to read them. You can email me at the email on the screen or the email in the caption of this video. But as always, you guys, thank you so much for watching. I hope you have the best night. I love you, and I'll catch you in the next one. Bye.
I grew up in Homestead, Florida, and if you don't know where that's at, that's in Dade County, okay? And if you grew up in Homestead, you know Miners Market. And Miners Market was a tiny little store that, you know, had like a little meat section, a little this, a little that. It was like, if you don't want to go to Winn-Dixie and you don't want to go to Publix, you would go to Miners Market. It was right down the street from where we lived at. And I remember that day, my mom was like, hey, I'm going to the store. I'm going to Miners Market. And I used to love their banana pudding that they used to make there fresh. And I was like, I want to go. And my brother, Josh, who has ADD, was like, can I go? And my mom was like, hell no. She didn't want to deal with his, she didn't want to deal with it. She was telling me, hurry up and put my shoes on. And Josh was, of course, being Josh, a pain in the ass, start, bitching and crying. I want to go. I was like 13. He's 12. He's a year younger than me. So as he's bitching and griping and I want to go, I remember putting on my shoes, watching him from the living room, grab some chancletas. And my mom's like, no, I'm telling you, you're not going. And she's yelling at him. And he books it out in front of through the door. And she's like, oh, this fucking kid, right? She walks out and she's telling me, hurry up. I'm going to meet you in the car if you're not out there at a certain time. Because, Puerto Rican moms, Hispanic moms in general, if you're not in the car when I tell you, I'm leaving you. So I go out, finish tying my shoes. I go out, I get in the car. And the first thing I do was look to the back, right? She had like a 1980-ish Audi hatchback. It was like a gold color. If you know about cars, you know what I'm talking about. They're kind of short and fat. Super tinted windows, ridiculous, with stick shift, and the center console kind of was like lower to the ground. The back is like kind of short, and I remember looking to the back in the passenger seat, right, and I could see my brother's silhouette. So I'm talking to my mom and talking to my brother. I remember my mom driving and looking at me like, whatever. I pulled down the visor. As I pull it down, I see my brother in the mirror, right? I could see his silhouette. I see his hair, wild eyes, but he's like kind of like this in the back seat. And he used to always have a very bad habit of putting his foot on the center console. And as we're driving over there, his foot is touching me and I'm getting irritated. I'm like, stop. And I remember I keep saying stop. And my mom's looking at me like, okay, well, like, what the fuck is wrong with this girl? And I keep saying, Josh, stop. Because he keeps touching me with his foot on my elbow, like poking me. And he was very, like, the ADD was so bad, right? And he loved poking on you. So I remember looking down, seeing his feet, flesh. And I slapped him. It made that sound. Okay? My mom's looking at me like, what is wrong with this girl? But I remember looking at my mom like, why is she looking at me like I'm fucking crazy when he's the one being an ass and bothering me? So I keep telling him, can you please stop hitting me? And she's not saying anything to me. She's just like, I need to get to the store. When you're in Miners Market parking lot, you could see inside. So my mom is watching me. She gets something very quickly. Of course, my banana pudding. And she's at the front. I can see her at the register and she's watching me, but I'm talking to my brother in the back seat. And the entire time I'm like, I can't believe mom let you be in here, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, just small talk, but he's not answering me. He's not saying shit. And I'm like, he's being so fucking rude. Cause okay, I slapped him, but like, hello, don't put your fucking dirty ass feet on top of me. So my mom gets in the car. We're on the way home. And I'm already fed up because he keeps poking me with his dirty ass feet. And at one point, we're getting very close to the house. At one point, he nudges me really hard with his feet. And I look down and I see his feet and I go, Josh, stop. And I remember seeing, the ankle and all that. When I said that and I turned to the back, Josh is not there. Okay? My mom looks at me as she's driving. She's like, what the hell are you talking about? Josh is not in the back. And I go and I look in the back all on the floor. And I'm like, no. He's there. She's like, Ginger, I left him home because I told him he cannot go. And I go, I saw him getting in the car. I saw him running out in the front. She said, yes, he got in the car, but I told him to get out the car and he's at home. I said, you're lying. Now I'm thinking, how can he disappear? Right? There's no rational explanation for that. There's no way I can find him. He's not on the floor, right? She's telling me I'm fucking crazy. I feel crazy because my heart is in my asshole at this point, because I literally felt him. I saw him in the mirror, like everything. I felt, he kept touching me. It was pissing me off. So as we're getting to the house, I'm arguing with her. I'm like, she's like, well, obviously he's not here. You know, where would he be? And so as we pull up, he runs out. And that's when I really was like, oh my God. And she's like, I told you he's not in the car. And I go, but Mom, I saw him. Like the terror in my face. She saw the terror in my face, right? And my brother comes out and I'm telling him what happened. But my mom was like, esta está loca. Like, there was nobody in the fucking car. What the fuck? So to me, now as an adult, I realize it's a mimic, but fuck, like to really feel, I felt the flesh. I felt it. I saw his fucking feet. I saw his fucking toes, his wild ass hair in the mirror. That's probably the most scariest moment. And like my heart really was in my ass.
Hello and welcome back to a series of spooky stories, The Haunted Felt. This series is brought to you by All Things Spooky and I got the amounts of paranormal activity. Different necklace today, but I got this one before I got the other one, and this one came with two, and they are stackable, and they look really cute together. It's down here if you want it. Is this lighting offensive? Am I doing too much? Let me know in the comments. Now onto the story. This was back in 2012. I was 18 at the time, going on to 19, and moved in with my boyfriend who was 22. We were living at his family's house, 4-bedroom, small home. We had the second bedroom of the second floor. This is important for context. In that bedroom, we had a small door that was a small storage space. It was slanted, so to go in, you had to remain ducked. The wall on the other side of that small storage place was the side of the roof on the front of the house. This is why the space was slanted. Our headboard was up against the wall of the small storage place, and the door was maybe 2 to 3 feet away from the left side of the bed. One day, his mom asked me to retrieve a small box that she had in there. This was her room before we moved in, so she had some stuff in that storage space. I walked in and she waited behind me, and I jumped and gasped at what I saw. I want to say it was a 3 to 4 foot porcelain doll standing in the corner of the storage. 3 to 4 foot? Like a person tall? She laughed and said, sorry, I forgot that doll was in here. Yeah, I bet you did. I said, oh my God, why is it there? She responded, oh, it's the landlord's doll. They didn't want to take it, so they gave it to me. My motherfucking ass. Take that bitch. Burn it. Throw it in the trash. Bury it. I don't give a fuck. It ain't staying here. I said, oh, well, why is it tucked away? Her smile faded and said, well, I had it out on display here, but it gave me the creeps. Yeah? So I stored it away, and I said, why not get rid of it if it freaked you out? Logic. She said, well, it's pretty, and I didn't want to throw it away, but I can see that you're unsettled by it, so I'll remove it soon. Then she knocked the doll down so it laid flat to face down on the floor. Yeah. Let's just piss it off while we're there. I told my boyfriend about it, and he said, she's never got rid of it? It's in here? I said, yeah, take a look. He said, no, thank you. So I asked, did something happen with that doll? He said, no, it's creepy, that's all. You're fucking lying. You're fucking lying, and I don't like that. I don't like that you're lying. So I asked, can you take it out? And he said, no, I don't want to ruin it and have my mom come for me for a stupid, creepy doll. This should have been a red flag, but teenage naive me. Fast forward maybe a few weeks to a month later, I forget about the doll. Really? Because how the fuck do you forget a 3 to 4 foot tall porcelain creepy ass fucking doll that's hiding in your room? We used to love watching scary movies, but this particular night we watched a kids movie and went to bed. Around 3 a.m., I woke up to my boyfriend whispering to me, did you hear that? Don't speak loud. I whispered back, what? When I heard scratches on the wall from the inner corner. I slept close to the window wall and he slept on the left close to the small door of the storage space. Good. So he can get attacked by the creepy doll since he didn't want to fucking get rid of it. The scratches on the wall went from the inner corner to above my head all the way to the door, and the door busted open as if someone kicked it. I can't unhear those scratches to this day, and this was 14 years ago. I said, oh my God. He shushed me as he covered my eyes and said, baby, just pray. Bitch, where's my Bible? Jesus, show yourself. It's me again. So I did, too afraid to move, and ended up passing out. The next day, we tried to reason about what it was, but it was no one in the house. It was impossible. They would have had to be on the roof. We had no attic and the roof was slanted. I said to him it had to be the doll. He said, shut up, you're crazy. It don't move. And that's why you sleep by the door where it's hidden. He checked and claimed that it was still on the floor, face down. He started placing heavy objects in front of the door because we found it open multiple times when no one was home. Fast forward a few weeks later, his sister came in searching for a handbag and went in and asked me to go as well because she was also scared of the doll. As we were leaving, I noticed the doll was now sitting facing forward. I told her and she said, what the fuck? It must be my mom just playing tricks. A few days later, he went in because it sounded like something fell and he told me, I don't know what mess you guys left. Let me go see before something breaks and my mother becomes upset. I peeked in and the doll was still sitting, now facing the door. September comes around after all the BS I endured with that man. I decided to leave him and move out. I was grabbing my things and the last things that I had were in that storage. I went in, pulled out what I could when I saw the doll standing closer to the door. I ran out and left the rest there and never went back. That house was haunted and that man was being haunted constantly. I went home with so much trauma and fear of the dark and any noise at night because the activity at that house was heavy. I still see things but ignore them so they leave me alone, but this was the scariest encounter that I had. I have many more, but I thought that this would be perfect for your spooky, scary story time. And it was. Speaking of a doll, my mom used to have this moose that like stood out. I don't know what was her obsession with moose, okay? But she had this stuffed moose and it was like standing up. My brother was so afraid of that fucking moose. And I tell you, every time that we would go into a room, that bitch would be there. It turns out that my mom was moving it because she knew that it scared him. I didn't even know that until like way later, but I wasn't like scared of it like that. That shit was just funny as fuck. So, I mean, she could have been playing pranks, but if she was getting the heebie-jeebies from it as well, and everyone else in that fucking house was too, you're hearing scratching and nobody else, please, that doll is possessed. Where is Zach Baggins to take that bitch when you need it? Anyway, rate it on a scale of 1 to 10. 1 being the least scary, creepy, spooky, 10 being the most. If you have a story of your own that you want to submit, you can do so on the link tree in my profile. I will see you all at the next episode. Stay spooky, friends.
Okay, so I made a post asking for your guys' paranormal stories, and boy, did some of you deliver. My friend Olivia is the first one that said, you know, pretty much everything I experienced, but the blankets ripping off of me and my friend when she stayed over at my house, and it leaving scratch marks on her leg was the most diabolical night. I woke up to go to the bathroom. It was around 2:30 a.m. I didn't turn on any lights because I didn't want to wake anyone up or my dog to start barking. However, there was some light coming in through the windows. When I opened my bedroom door, I saw a girl who looked like Reagan from The Exorcist. She saw me and she took a step sideways by my bed and then she disappeared like she stepped through the floor. She was gone, never to be seen again. So creepy. Ew. My friend Jonathan commented and said, this happened to him 2 weeks ago. I woke up at exactly 4:44 a.m. I went back to sleep and all of a sudden I felt a presence. Sleep paralysis, it could have been. I felt weight as if someone was at the end of my bed. I hear the voice of a little girl. She said something and I was too afraid to open my eyes. I didn't know what she said as it was difficult to hear, but I believe she was saying, I can see you. I hear giggling after and then it ended. All went on for 17 seconds. That's terrible. One night it was raining and there was also a thunderstorm. The sound of the thunder woke me up and I jolted from my bed. Once I realized it was just thunder, I laid back down and closed my eyes. Then I felt someone staring at me, just eyes on me. I slowly opened my eyes and I kid you not, the little girl was staring back at me at the end of my bed. From what I remember, she was all white, like see-through transparent white. The first night in my house, I had a nightmare that a screaming, shrieking woman came out of my closet and flew towards me. I used my left leg to kick her away. She grabbed my left foot and dragged me off the bed. When I woke up, I was halfway off the bed and my left sock was missing. No, it wasn't in the blankets. I later experienced paranormal activity in that house for the next 3 years. I moved. Woke up in the middle of the night. I already knew my old house was haunted, but I woke up and I got very scared because I heard loud breathing coming from my closet and no one was there. I was like 7 or 8 in my room. One day I was in the middle of moving my dresser and it was next to my bed and we didn't finish moving it. And the same night I was about to fall asleep, my dresser had a toy gun on it in the middle and it wasn't even close to falling off. I swear I saw a little girl that was my age at the time. She had long, straight, ginger hair, and she was wearing a white dress with little blue flowers on it, and I was about to fall asleep, and I saw her kind of run across my bed to the dresser, but as soon as she was running, she kind of disappeared in the middle of it, and the toy gun fell off. Everyone keeps calling me crazy, but my uncle who used to live in the same house when he was a kid said he had the same experiences.
The story was sent in by someone who went on a bachelorette trip in Logan, Ohio to somewhere called Hocking Hills. For storytelling's sake, we're going to call this person Jane. But Jane said that she, her wife, now wife at the time, fiance, and their two maid of honors were going to go on a bachelorette trip, girls' weekend, super laid back, gonna rent a cabin and just kind of hang out. I'm vibing. I love it. Her maid of honor is her sister. Her wife's maid of honor is her best friend. So it's the four of them. They get to this cabin. It looks exactly how it did online. When they walk in, you can see that there's 2 bedrooms, a kitchenette, some open hangout space. And if you look down, you can see that the hot tub is located like a floor down. So they decide that they're going to walk down and they're going to check out the hot tub. And when they walk down onto this like bottom level, they realize that there's actually a bedroom in here that wasn't pictured on the listing when they researched the rental. It's just a bed, a TV, kind of a little hangout area, great little space. So Jane decides that she and her wife are going to stay in this room. Wasn't listed on the rental, but she didn't really think anything of that, nor did her wife or their friends. But they decide that that's where they're going to stay. The girls decide that they are going to go out and just hang out in the hot tub for a little while. So they all get ready. They all go out there. The 4 of them are in there. They're in there for a little bit. Next thing you know, Jane's sister looks at her and tells her, I'm really not feeling well. So I actually think that I'm going to go to bed. I don't know what's going on. Jane looks at her sister and she realizes like she's not looking so good. She definitely does look sick. So I'm going to get her upstairs. Gets her upstairs, puts her in bed, takes her glasses off of her and places them on the nightstand next to her bed. Goes back downstairs to get into the hot tub. When she goes outside, she realizes that their Bluetooth speaker, which was totally charged when they arrived, has now had its battery completely drained and is no longer working. Jane thinks, oh, that's weird, but it happens. Her wife's best friend, and her are hanging out in the hot tub. She and her wife's best friend, after a little bit, decide, we're going to go inside, we're going to dry off and kind of get ready for bed. They tell her wife says, no worries, I'm just going to hang here for a few minutes, but not long. I'll be right in. Okay, they go inside and they're downstairs in this little area and they're just kind of hanging out. They're just kind of talking and they realize we've actually been talking for a while. At this point, we're dried off. Like we're ready to put our jammies on and go to bed. But Jane's wife has still not gotten out of the hot tub or come into the house. So Jane and her wife's best friend go outside and they ask Jane's wife, hey, are you ready to come inside? As they get closer to Jane's wife, they realize that she is gone. Like it's vacant. Like she's just staring off into space, kind of like a limp noodle, not really reacting to anything that's going on around her. But she does respond to them and she looks at them, kind of blankly and just says, nope, I'm going to stay right here. I'm out here with my friends. Baby, what friends? We're all in the house. And kind of thinks, okay, she's messing with me. And she's like, no, like seriously, come inside. And her wife just looks at her and says, no, I'm fine. I'm out here hanging out with my friends. But there's no emotion behind the responses. Jane realizes this is not like my wife. Something is up. I need to get her out of this hot tub. I need to figure out what's going on. She's starting to come closer to her and she asks her, just in conversations, trying to keep her talking, like, okay, like, well, what do your friends look like? Jane's wife responds with, I don't know. There's 2 of them right here. And then there's 7 of them. So I can't see all of them, but they are here. They're fine. They just don't have any faces. Okay. At this point, Jane and her wife's best friend are like, okay, we really got to get her inside. Something is wrong. Having a medical emergency? Like, is this some sort of strike? I don't know. So they physically drag her wife out of this hot tub and they bring her inside. She is still completely vacant. Like, she is present, but like the lights, like the eyes are open, but the light is not on type of reaction to everything happening around her. She is physically fighting against Jane and her best friend to get back outside to her friends. Even though Jane's wife is doing this, there's no solid emotion behind what she is doing. It's all just very mechanical, very not emotional, just very inhuman, not like Jane's wife. Jane takes her wife upstairs, just getting her as far away from this exit and this hot tub as she can. And she's like, okay, let me grab my cell phone. We call for help. Yeah, girl, like we're going to call for help now. She grabs her cell phone, picks it up. Even though it was a full battery just a couple of hours prior, the battery is completely drained. The phone is dead. Jane walks into her sister's bedroom where she had put her to sleep not long before. And when she walks in, her sister is still awake. Jane takes her wife with her because she's not leaving her alone to go see her friends. But sister is still awake. She's kind of telling her what's going on. Sister reaches over on the nightstand to grab her glasses so she can see. Glasses are not there. Glasses are gone. Now they are searching high and low for her sister's glasses. They look all around. They don't see anything. Finally, they look underneath the bed. And her sister's glasses had somehow gotten their way to the middle of underneath of her bed. As the glasses stands back up, Jane's wife is sitting on the bed. Jane's wife is staring just
blankly at the bathroom that is in this bedroom. And she's still staring at the bathroom, and she tells Jane and Jane's sister, turn the light on. So Jane walks over to the bathroom to flip that light on, and she says when she does, her sister actually collapses and hits the floor. Sister tells her, I can't breathe. I can't breathe. I'm having a hard time breathing. At this point, Jane says, I'm putting it together. I'm seeing the full picture here. My sister is collapsing on the floor, not able to breathe. The glasses are in the middle of underneath the bed when I know that I put them on the nightstand, and she said that she didn't touch them. My wife is gone and trying to go outside to see her friends. Batteries on all of our electronics are completely drained. It's time to go get your things, says Jane. Jane says. At this point, all of the girls are starting to feel this sense of impending doom. Something nefarious is going on. We feel fear. So they quickly pack their things and they get out of there. Jane said that her parents were actually staying not far from where they were, and she was very shaken up. Now, luckily, Jane's wife's phone did have some battery life left in it, so she was able to call her parents from her wife's phone. She told them, I can't drive, but I can't stay here. We cannot stay here. Get everything loaded into the car. They all get into the car. They shut the doors. Next thing you know, the Bluetooth speaker that had no life left in it, nothing, no battery, just goes off in the back. It says, Bluetooth is ready to connect. Jane says that her wife kind of blankly looks at her, still in this kind of trance-like state, and just says, you should drive. Jane puts the pedal to the metal. They are out of there. Jane's parents meet them just down the road so that someone can drive the car, because Jane says none of us are in a state to be behind a wheel right now. We are so shaken up by everything that happened in that house. Jane says the instant that they are off the property, her wife goes completely back to normal. And she's like, where are we going? Why did we leave? What happened? Has no memory of what happened when they were in the cabin, what happened in the hot tub, her friends that she wanted to hang out with. She's just completely normal again. But they're not staying there. So they go that night and they stay with Jane's parents. The next morning, Jane realizes that she was in such a rush to get out of there that she left some things, including her cell phone, which was dead. So she asks her dad, will you please come back with me? I can't go back to this place by myself, and just help me do a once over and make sure that I have everything. Dad agrees. They go to the cabin and they get there. They're looking for her cell phone everywhere. They cannot find it. Her dad says, let me call it. Jane says that's useless because it doesn't have any battery. It's dead. And he said, well, let me just try. But Dad calls the phone and the phone rings, except it doesn't ring in the last room that Jane was in when they decided that they were going to leave. It actually rings in that downstairs bedroom that wasn't pictured on the cabin listing. Jane and her dad go down there. They grab the phone. The phone is on. The phone's battery is completely fine. Jane is like, hell nah. Grabs her phone, gathers anything else that they had maybe left behind, and they go to walk out the front door. They don't touch the door. They just walk out of the front door, and the door slams behind them and locks. They can't get back in. Jane says that she has not been back to Hawking Hills, doesn't plan on going back. Jane never did end up going back to Hawking Hills. She said, I'm good on cabins. I'm good. But she and her wife obviously did get married, and everything is great and lovey-dovey, and we're so happy to hear that. Jane said her wife has not experienced any episodes like this. She hadn't experienced any before and did not experience anything afterwards. Physically, there's nothing wrong. It was just something weird that happened with that cabin. But Jane's wife has no memory of anything that led up to them quickly packing the car and getting out of there. Jane says that what should have been one of the most relaxing and fun weekends actually just turned into the scariest thing that's ever happened to her. You don't like that? But thank you so much for that story. As you will notice, we do have a new office. I always said I was going to drive the Toyotas till the wheels fell off. Turns out, wheels don't turn if everything else is breaking. So I bought a new to me car. The 4Runner right now is at the mechanic shop, just seeing if it'll go again, if the wheels will turn. I travel a lot for work, a lot of driving, especially late at night. And after I told that story about Carmen, no girl, you're not going to catch me breaking down on the side of the road. No way, no way. I did take the hit, and I bought a new to me, more reliable vehicle to keep myself safe. And if that's the type of investment that I have to make to keep myself safe, like, I'm going to do it every time. And my kids too, you know what I mean? But thank you guys. I hope everyone has a wonderful evening, and I'll talk to you tomorrow.
So this happened to the girl's family members. It didn't necessarily happen to her, but wait till you fucking hear this. Apparently this happened really close to where she lives because it happened to her auntie. So this girl had an aunt who really wanted to have a daughter, but unfortunately? Is it unfortunate? She had all boys. She had an aunt who really wanted to have a girl, but she only ended up having boys. That's what I should have said to begin with. She always desired to have a daughter. She wished she had a daughter, and I guess because she didn't have a daughter, she did end up buying herself a doll. So her niece, who's telling us the story, says that when she bought this doll, she treated this doll like if it was her daughter, and she loved this doll so much, and she would even tell every family member that she loved it. She would shower the doll, she would take the doll everywhere that she would go, and she really did treat the doll like another member of the family. So there was one day where the youngest son ends up getting really sick. He is bedridden for like 3 days, and she would tend to him. So because of this, she ended up leaving the doll right next to him in bed. So on the 4th day where he has been in bed with his mom and the doll, she wakes up around 3 in the morning with this little boy screaming at the top of his lungs. She immediately turns the light on and she sees that her son is on the floor and he's holding on to his throat and he's coughing really bad. And at the same time that he's doing this, he then starts pointing to the door. When the mom walks towards the door, all she sees is that the doll is laying right in front of the door, just there. When she sees that the doll is laying there, the first instinct that the mom has is to get mad at the kid because obviously he had been playing with the doll, and the kid starts denying that. He's like, no, and walks to the doll and starts kicking the doll. She was choking me. Your doll was choking me, is what the boy says to his mom. His mom started laughing and grabbed the doll, put the doll by her side, and just went to lay down. Obviously, she didn't believe when he said that the doll was choking him. She thought it was a joke. Now, the crazy shit about this was that the days would go by and the rest of the other sons started to say the same thing about the doll. The boys claimed that they would see when the doll would get up and start walking towards them in bed, and that the doll would even talk to them because she would threaten them. The kids claimed that this doll would tell them that she was gonna kill them. And whenever they would tell their mom, this girl's auntie, she wouldn't believe them because she thought that they were just jealous of the doll, like because she had been treating this doll really well, that maybe they were acting out because of that. So on one particular night, the mom ends up being awoken because she thought she heard like weird sounds, but she didn't end up getting out of bed. She laid there and she actually tried to just go back to sleep. But that was when she felt something really weird and she kind of opened her eyes just a little bit. What she saw was this doll climbing up to get into bed with her. You know, where she was when she first went to sleep, where she should be when she opened her eyes and got awoken. Well, now she's seeing this doll trying to get on the bed with her. This doll was obviously trying to climb back into bed with her to lay in the spot where she was always laying and had her sleeping next to her. The aunt closed her eyes and pretended to be asleep, and then she decided that she was gonna move a little bit just to see what the doll would do. And she said that she just moved one of her legs and that this doll just threw herself on the bed, like Andy's coming type shit. Now the mom, she couldn't help herself anymore. She could not pretend to be asleep. She jumps out of bed, she turns on the light, she wakes up her husband and tells him what she just saw. You're a liar. You just wanted to play with your doll in the middle of the night. Her husband should have been like, you're lying. You're just playing with her. No, so she dead ass grabs the doll that was like pretending to be asleep now, throws her bitch ass to the floor and tells her husband everything that she had just seen. The husband grabs that doll, they both go outside and they burn it, and they ended up throwing it in the trash can. Now the following day, they actually end up seeing this doll. She reappeared in their yard, and obviously she's looking a little bit scarier being that she was burned. They end up calling a priest, and he comes, he blesses the house, and this priest ends up leaving with this doll. The aunt actually had to move from that house because after everything occurred, she would now end up seeing a woman at the foot of her bed. And they didn't just move like they got their stuff. No, they left everything that they owned in this house. It was almost like they just did it quickly. Her and her husband grabbed the kids and they left with nothing. They wanted to leave everything in that house. They didn't want to take anything with them. She ends up going to her sister's house because before they left the town, they stopped to tell them everything that happened just so that they wouldn't go to that house or anywhere near it. And as a matter of fact, the girl telling us the story was 9 years old at the time when she heard everything that happened there. Her aunt, till this day, has one, not returned to that town, fuck that, and two, has never gotten close to another doll again. I wish you would have listened when your kids were telling you, but I guess that's cool though. I want to ask why parents don't listen, but my mom also didn't, and now that I'm an adult, she would say it's because she was scared too, which makes a lot of sense. I mean, even though I'm an adult, I would be fucking scared if I had to could come and be like, oh, the doll choked me. What? I mean, I would leave immediately. I would believe immediately. I would do something immediately. But yeah, I would be scared too. Like, you don't send me back to my room after I tell you that. What the fuck? Anyway, what would you guys do, or what do you guys think about this story? So this girl says that this happened to her after her mom had passed away, and that she had to stay in her mom's house after the funeral and things because she had to take care of all of that. She had just given birth and she was very hormonal, she was emotional, and she was in a really bad state. She honestly didn't want to sleep in her mom's bedroom, but she had no other option. And there's a reason why I have this background. So she says that on top of her mom's bed, like where the headboard is one of these old kind of crucifix, I think that's what they're called, and it was really old, the type where Jesus looks like he's in pain and that he's crying. And ever since she was a little girl, that always scared her. Every time she would walk into her mom's room, the Jesus would always scare her for whatever reason. By this point, she had been in that house by herself with the baby because the rest of the family members had to go back into the city, being that they had to go back to work. She remembers being too quiet in there and she just felt uneasy, but even then she was extremely tired and she did end up falling asleep. She doesn't know how long she had been asleep at that point, but something grabbed her by the hair and pulled her really, really hard. That pull was so aggressive that it woke her from her sleep. Like, she was already dreaming. She turns the light on, she sits up, and she's looking around the room like, who the fuck pulled my hair? There was nobody in the room. She didn't hear anybody in the house. And that is when she got immediate goosebumps, because she realized that the way that her hair was pulled could only come from above her. And the only thing that was there, you know, by the headboard was that big crucifix with the Jesus on it. She was immediately scared. She didn't even think twice. She grabbed her baby. She walked out of the house and went over to the neighbor's house and started knocking on their door. The neighbors did open the door and she pleaded with them to let her stay the night with them just for that night. And being that they saw her like really panicky and worried, they did end up letting her in. She honestly did not sleep that night, but when the morning came, she had no other choice but to go back to her mom's house. Now, when she gets to the door of her mom's house, she notices that something is wrong because that front door is open and she didn't leave it open when she ran out of there. She closed it. When she walks into the house, she realizes that everything is unorganized, everything thrown on the ground. It was like somebody had gone in there to rob her. She immediately calls the police and they enter the home. They look at everything. Dressers are open. Everything is just messed up. And they told her that it must have been in the middle of the night where these robbers had came in. All the doors were broken. Some of the windows were broken, but the weird shit was that it almost looked like they had gone in to look for her. The bed was upside down, like if they were trying to find her. It almost looked like they had looked at every single corner trying to find her. She ends up going in to see what the police was talking about, and she ends up seeing that that crucifix is on the ground and it was torn apart, like it was broken into pieces. She explains that that was the moment that she understood something that she cannot even explain. She believes that the crucifix, the Jesus did pull her hair, but it wasn't to scare her. It was to get her out of that house. If she had stayed the night at that house and these people would have came in, she has no idea what would have happened to her or what would have happened to her baby. This story literally gave me chills listening to it. What do you guys think?
I think there's a remote viewer in my house watching my family and I sleep. And before anyone says, oh, you're just tired, or oh, you're just imagining things, I need you to understand that this has been happening for years, that multiple people in my family have experienced this, and whatever this is seems to be behaving intelligently, and it doesn't seem like it wants to be detected. This is Sarah's Spooky Scary Story Time, and she says in order to understand what's happening, you need to understand her house and the layout. So she and her husband built the house in 2020, so she doesn't think whatever's in the house is residual energy from another family left over. They live in the house with their 6 biological children and their dog, and when they moved into the house, she had just given birth to her 5th baby. Second floor of the house, there are 2 hallways. One hallway houses most of the children's bedrooms, and the other hallway houses a guest room and the craft room. And the craft room is where most of the activity seems to originate. The craft room has a small attic access door that they didn't even see until their final walkthrough of the house. The attic access door opens up to an attic space that goes over the master bedroom and the main living area of the house. I assume this is like a loft type situation where there's a part of the house that's raised and a part of the house that just has high ceilings. And so Sarah says that this weirdness started almost immediately upon moving in the house. They had just had their baby, as I mentioned, and so the baby slept in the master bedroom with the parents. One of Sarah's older boys moved into the craft room and he intended to use that room as his bedroom. Until he started having nightmares in that room. And of course, at the time, they didn't think it had anything to do with the room. They just thought that he was going through a phase. But Sarah remembers standing in the doorway and thinking that the air in the room felt heavy, but she was like, maybe it's the airflow. Maybe this room is just warmer than the others. Tried different things to make him comfortable, but the nightmares continued, and eventually they gave up and moved him into a room with one of his siblings, and the nightmares stopped immediately. Eventually, another one of their children had gotten old enough to have her own room, so they moved her into the craft room. Then she started having horrible nightmares, and they didn't know what really was going on, so they moved another one of their daughters into the room with her, and her nightmares stopped immediately. So that became the pattern, and they started noticing, because anytime a child slept in there by themselves, they had horrible nightmares. When nightmares aren't necessarily a thing in her family, they had never experienced dealing with something like this before, but anytime there was another child in the room, or one of the parents slept in the room with the child, the nightmares stopped. And it didn't matter which child slept in the room. Whoever slept in there had nightmares if they were alone. The room was shared, everything was fine. And for years, they kind of just juggled this room. They rearranged the house constantly. They constantly have guests over, and Sarah's husband works from home. So she says there were constantly different people moving in and out of the room. Until eventually they just settled on having it be her craft rooms, and she wanted one anyway. After her children stopped sleeping in the room for 2 years, nothing happened until 2025 when she started having trouble sleeping. She didn't know what it was exactly. She had never had problems sharing a bed with her husband before, but she was like, you know what? Maybe I just need my own space. I need to sleep in my own room. And so she started sleeping in the guest room across from the craft room. She slept fine in there. There was better airflow and a better mattress. But after a few weeks, she started hearing footsteps out in the hallway late at night. And eventually she asked her husband, like, hey, why do you keep walking around at night? He looked confused and said, I thought that was you. Apparently, both of them had been hearing the footsteps for weeks, but both of them thought it was the other one. That night, Sarah said that they were so distinct that she knew someone was out in the hallway, so she immediately got up to go and check on the kids, but every single one was asleep. She walked downstairs to check on her husband, and he was still awake, but he was awake in bed watching TV. The footsteps kept happening, even though they had no explanation, and after noticing it enough nights in a row, she realized that there was a pattern, that the footsteps always originated in the craft room. Every single time, the footsteps sounded like they originated right outside the attic door in the craft room. She walked down the hall, turned the corner, and continued in the loft upstairs, and they were slow and they were measured, and it sounded like someone was pacing the same route over and over. One night, Sarah's husband actually heard it too, so distinct that he ran upstairs to check on the kids and Sarah, but nothing was out of place. There were no doors open. Everything was still. There was no movement whatsoever. And then things escalated. In January, Sarah says she wanted to repaint the craft room, and so she emptied it out and she put everything that was in there into the guest bedroom where she had been sleeping, but it was so full of things that she couldn't sleep in there anymore. Boxes piled up on the bed, and so she had to start sleeping in the master bedroom with her husband again. As soon as she moved back downstairs into the master, her sleep got worse again, and she was like, I can't take this. So she started sleeping on the loft couch upstairs. That first night, she actually slept well, like better than she had in weeks, and so she started sleeping there intentionally. But then she noticed that the footsteps started up again, and their pattern changed. Before, they were mostly in the hallway, but now they were coming toward her. You hear the footsteps walk out of the craft room, walk down the hallway, and walk around the couch that she was sleeping on, and then they would stop like somebody was standing directly over her. Every single time this happened, she would open her eyes expecting to see someone standing over her, but every single time there was nothing except a dark room. She says she has a dog that sleeps with her on the couch, and not once has this dog reacted to the sound. She says whatever this is either isn't physical or it's something that doesn't register to animals. For her, that's one of the creepiest things about this whole situation. But about a month ago, her family was having a loud movie night in the living room downstairs, and she was desperate to get some sleep. But she kept hearing their noises from the guest room where she was sleeping, and she was like, you know what, I'm just going to go sleep in the craft room. She dragged a trundle bed in there and fell asleep. Eventually, she woke up to the sound of footsteps again, but this time they were happening inside the room. They were walking across the floor and next to the bed, and then she heard the doorknob turn. No movement from the door, just the sound of someone quietly turning the knob. A little freaked out, but confident that no one was actually in the room, she turned over and tried to fall back asleep. But then something strange started happening. She said there's a tiny muscle in her ear that she knows some people can move voluntarily. She's never been able to. The footsteps continued, and any time they got close to the bed, that tiny muscle in her ear would move, and it would pull her ear backward toward the source of the sound. Strange, but what was she to do? But then came the night that genuinely terrified her. Nights ago, she was getting ready to go to bed when suddenly the room started smelling like fresh paint, even though it had been painted weeks ago. And it was such a strong smell that even her son, who walked past the room, said, Mom, why does it smell like paint in here again? Opened the window up beside the bed, and about every 30 minutes after falling asleep, heard movement. Footsteps circling the bed, stopping next to her, her ear would twitch back. So eventually she thought maybe it had something to do with the airflow, so she got up and closed the window, and the sound stopped. Which made her wonder, was whatever was in the room trying to get in or get out? Confident that the footsteps had finally stopped, she rolled over to fall back asleep. But then she felt her ear twitch again, even though there was no movement. And then just a split second after that, she heard the doorknob release, like someone had been holding it. Then she heard what sounded like soft footsteps tiptoeing toward her. She was freaked out enough that at that point she started talking out loud to whatever it was. She said, "You don't have permission to be here. Leave my family alone. Get out of my house." Strangely enough, the footsteps got quieter, not gone, but like whatever it was trying to prevent her from hearing it. That's why she says she doesn't feel like this is paranormal, because if it was a spirit, it would want to be noticed. Whatever this is, it feels calculated and hidden, like it wants to observe everyone in the house without them noticing. That's why she started wondering about remote viewing. Not that she thinks that she's important. She said they have no political connections, they don't work in government, they don't really have anything valuable, but the behavior feels so deliberate. Especially because everything seems connected to that craft room and the hidden door to the attic that the builders never told them about until they did their final walkthrough. Now she says she can't help but wonder who these footsteps belong to that originate there every single night, that wander through the house and watch her family sleep. Her name has been changed, but she said she will be looking at the comments to see what you all think she should do in this situation. So let her know what you think. And if you have a spooky, scary story time you think nobody would believe, or that just leaves you questioning reality, send it in. We'd love to hear it.
Snacks in hand, the vibe is set, and once I start, don't eat too much, because you gotta stay fine. But come on, bestie, yeah! Hi, bestie, I missed you. My birthday is in an hour, so if you're watching this video, it's probably already my birthday. But I'm here with the story. I know I owe you guys. Like, it's been such a busy week. Baby girl's birthday was 4 days ago. Move-in day was 2 days ago. Well, about to be 2 days ago. But I'm here with the story. So go get your snack and your gardening essentials. One of my YouTube supporters told me to start saying that instead. For the sake of the story, let's call this lady Nessa. So there is this artist that Nessa absolutely freaking loves. Not gonna name any names, but Nessa like literally loved their music. It's like everything about them. Anyway, so the artist had went on tour, right? Just so y'all know this story is not recent. It happened a long time ago. So boom, the artist is coming to her city. So she cops a ticket and she cops the meet and greet ticket because like she loves this artist. So boom, she goes to the show. The show was amazing. She had mad fun. And so now it's time for the meet and greet. And so she goes to the, meet and greet part. So finally, when it's her turn, she sees the artist, says hi. Immediately, she's like losing it because she loves this artist. Nessa is a very attractive woman. I went on her profile. She thick, she bad. But immediately, the artist kind of like took an interest in her, right? Everybody's dream, right? So the artist, like after the meet and greet, they talked, they, took pictures. The artist is like, hey, I'm having an after party. You should come. So he calls his manager over, said, hey, take her information down. I want her to come to the after party. And so she's like, oh, hell yeah, what? This is a dream come true. I will be there. So boom, she, they exchange information. She leaves. She's getting, she's going back to get ready for, the after party. And as she's getting ready for the after party, she gets a text from the manager. And the manager's like, hey, this is your entry to the after party. But so-and-so said, can you actually meet him at his hotel room first? So she's like, his hotel room? Okay. And to be quite honest, she loved that artist so much that she was down for whatever happened in that hotel room, okay? Boom, she gets ready, she get cute, she go to the hotel room. Get there, she meets with his manager. His manager takes her up to his room. And she gets there, she gets inside, she sees him, it's just him in there. So she's like, okay, I see what type of time we on, but I'm on it. Oh, cool. He was very nice, offered her some wine and stuff like that. And so he said, you can just leave with me to go to the after party. You can just ride with me. She's like, okay, yeah, sure, like, cool. And so they start talking, they start getting to know each other and stuff like that. And of course, things start to get a little touchy. They start making out. And as they start making out, something in her soul is telling her to leave. But because, she's having those thoughts in the middle of, everything happening, she's like, oh, I think this is just nerves. I think it's because, this is actually, freaking happening. I can't believe it. My body is probably telling me to leave because this is, She's like, I'm not passing up this opportunity. I'm staying. I should note that she's Caribbean, so she knows her shit, right? So boom. So he's like, hey, give me a second. I'm gonna go to the bathroom. Like, I'll be right back. And she's like, okay, period. He's gonna go freshen up, you know. So he goes to the bathroom, and as he's in there, she hears a lighter, right? Like the flick of a lighter. And she's not thinking nothing of it. It's an artist. Like, he's probably gonna light his blunt or something, or light his cigarette or something. She notices through the crack of the door that the bathroom became a little more illuminated. And so she figured that, oh, maybe he was lighting a candle. Then, not too long after that, she hears the artist humming. And at first she didn't think nothing of it. But then something about the hum, the melody that he was humming just was not normal, and it was not settling either. And like at this point, her guts is screaming for her to get the fuck out. And so at this point, she's starting to be like, okay, candle humming, and that humming sounds like, she already kind of figured like it's some shit going on in there. But let me not just assume. Let me wait till he come out. So he comes out. He doesn't open the door all the way when he's coming out, but he opens it enough for her to peep one candle that was lit, a bottle full of herbs. That's all she needed to see. It actually got so much worse because when he came out, he was butt naked, which is what she expected, right? However, she notices that in his private area, it's very shiny. But it's only his private area that's shiny, right? Now, one would assume body oil, right? But why wouldn't you put the body oil all over your body? And so at this point, she decides like, yeah, this is not worth it. I'm gonna go. And so she tries to tell the artist like, hey, actually, like, I don't think I can make it. Like, I'm gonna go. But it's such an awkward situation because like 5 minutes ago, she was going. And so now it's kind of hard to explain why she wants to leave. And so he's on some shit like, what the fuck do you mean you about to leave? Like, you feel me? The more she tried to tell him, like, yeah, no, it's okay, I'm gonna go, the angrier he got. Not, like, angry to the point where, like, he's getting physical or nothing, but you could tell that he's visibly getting angry that she's about to leave. She also found herself, as this is happening, like, she found herself very tired. She actually realized, like, from the time that they were making out and he went to the bathroom, she came in here very, energized, very ready for the night, but she's feeling drained. And again, she's Caribbean. From what she saw in the bathroom, she already knows what's going on, so she's trying to be out. So, like, good thing the artist was very, not understanding. He definitely didn't want her to leave, but he wasn't trying to, like, keep her either. So he on some shit like, I bet you go. So she left, and on the way out, he heard him call his manager and tell his manager, bring in the next bitch. This one was too hard. She's like, oh, this what y'all do. So she decided to linger a little bit more and actually watch the manager bring in the next bitch. Very beautiful young lady, mind you. So right before, like, the manager took her in, she, like, got in a little bit and played it off and told the manager, like, hey, I'm leaving. Actually, like, I had an emergency. I'm so sorry. Like, I feel so bad. I had to leave. And says hi to the girl and gets the girl's Instagram. So she left, and that was it. Long story short, about like a month later, she still, follows the artist and follows that girl. From that night until like a month later, this girl's life literally flipped upside fucking down. She's on Instagram complaining about how she crashed her car. A whole lot of shit was happening to her. All while that artist, great things started happening to them. And so she put 2 and 2 together. This artist is using these fans as a fucking ritual, sexual rituals, to get more fame. God, she was able to, exit herself from that situation. And she was very hesitant about telling this story. Like, she only told people close to her, but like, she trusts me. She know I'm not gonna you know what? If the girl had my ebook, she probably could have fixed her life. But you have a chance to get yours, so don't forget to click the link in my bio and get yours. But yeah, that's the story, y'all. Don't forget to let me know what you was eating in the comments. So I'm still waiting on those reviews for my ebook, bro. Y'all said y'all was gonna vlog it because these people are saying I'm lying about these reviews for sales. So yeah, vlog, please. Okay, I love you. Bye.
Something I think about so often is just how much we are not privy to that is going on all over the world. Not what the news tells you or what goes viral on social media, but what gets quietly buried. Stuff entire communities swear is real. Things the government has acknowledged but then suppressed. And documented by journalists, yet somehow you and I never get to know about it. Wait till you hear this story. This one's been documented, officials have it on record, and it made news in multiple countries. This story takes place in Zimbabwe, a landlocked country in southern Africa. In Zimbabwe, there are deep-rooted cultural belief in creatures referred to as njuzu, or water spirits. Wait, before I keep going, this is for entertainment purposes only. Okay, so these creatures are akin to mermaids. And we're not talking the pretty hair combing ones from fairy tale. These are something else entirely. They have been said to drag people underwater, and sometimes they keep them. This gets really interesting. In 2012, Zimbabwe's water resources minister stood in front of a government Senate committee and with a straight face reported that the construction being done on 2 different dam sites had to be stopped. Workers were sent to install the pumps, and every single one of them walked off the job and would not speak of what they saw. And they vowed to never return because of these mermaids. Now, this minister also went on to say he does not personally believe in them, but he also doesn't know how to explain what is going on. So he tried something. He thought that maybe the workers were too culturally influenced by their beliefs. So he went as far as bringing outside consultants in. These were engineers from completely outside of the community with zero ties to this belief system and local tradition. And same thing. They went, they came out, and refused to go back. At the Osborne Dam specifically, divers went hundreds of meters down with oxygen masks to see what the heck is going on down there. And when they came up, they said they will never come back, and they would not say why. So the government's solution is to call in traditional healers. These rituals included sacrificing cattle and brewing beer. They would also perform ceremonies at the water's edge. And get this, only after that did the pumps switch on. That is not the only thing that has gone on in Zimbabwe's culture regarding these mermaids, because you have to hear about Rowai. Rowai Chiwakwa grew up in a small village in Zimbabwe. In 1980, she was 9 years old, and she went fishing one afternoon. It was along the Runde River, and she went with her brother's wife and a male relative. So when they were done for the day and they were packing up, the male relative caught one last small fish, and he handed it to Rowai to carry. So she accidentally drops it, and the fish falls into the sand, and it gets dirty. And being 9 years old, she grabs it, turns around, and runs back to the river to sort of dunk it into the water to wash it off. The 2 adults kept walking slowly, sort of waiting for her to catch up, but she never did. They heard a splashing sound from the water, and they turned around, and they couldn't see her. So they ran back, and they're looking around, and there's no evidence of like an attack by a crocodile. There is no BLOOD. There didn't even seem to be signs of much of a struggle. Rowai was just simply gone. The family searched and searched, and they went on to perform rituals every year to do anything they could to get their daughter back. Her father even searched for her until the day he passed away. So freaking sad. And then 2 of her brothers searched for her until the day they passed away. And her remaining brother, Alfred, sold the house and everything he owned in order to keep doing everything he could to fund the search. Over the years, every so often, certain people from the village would report that they had seen Rowai along the river. One little girl in particular delivered a message that was supposedly straight from Rowai, saying that she wanted her family to know that she is alive and okay. But the messenger girl didn't have any further information, and they'd go and look, and still nothing. Guys, this had gone on for 40 years. And then on October 31st, 2020, Rowai walked back home. The family had brought in a traditional healer that performed intense rituals in order to do what they could to get her back. They performed these at the exact same spot where Rowai went missing 2 decades prior, and it freaking worked. Okay, and this is what the journalists found. Rowai was there wrapped in a colorful cloth, wearing a crown of feathers. Flanked by spiritual healers, she barely spoke and only nodded. She did mumble a few words, but not much. They said her hair was so long, and according to the family, she looked vastly younger than she should have for the age she would have been. The family refused to let anyone photograph her, and she herself told them no photographs. The chief of the area was there. Government officials also showed up. The district council CEO was there, and he said on record that everybody there was astounded. In his words, it was unexplainable. Her brother reported that she had struggled to eat and to speak, almost like someone trying to remember how to exist in a world that they had not been a part of for a very long time. And then just months after Rowai came home, Another young girl from the village went missing. Same river and same circumstances, and she was 11 years old. The community, the chief, and the officials present all attribute the disappearance to the Njuzu, or mermaid. Something lives in those waters. Something halted the productions, and something took Rowai all those years ago and brought her back looking way younger than she should have. So now my question is, do you believe in mermaids? And if not, then what explains all of those officially documented events? Drop your thoughts below. And if you have a creepy story of your own, please share it. And if you're new here, follow for more creepy story time.
My dad keeps calling my brother, which wouldn't be a big deal except my dad's dead. Lip gloss on so I can run this mouth. Now focus. Scary story time. Fright Night Files. Okay, so get this. In 2019, Danielle said that her dad was 54 and had a massive heart attack and passed away. They didn't think that he was unwell. They thought everything was great. He didn't show any signs. Then just one day he's there, one day he's not. Her brother, who was 19 at the time, took it really hard. Like, he did not take it well at all, which who would, right? Well, he starts getting these calls on his phone, and he noticed that they were local. They were like a 270 number, but the first 2 calls he got, he didn't answer. And then he got it again, so he answered it, and it was just like dead air. Nothing was there. So like a week goes by, he doesn't hear anything. He gets the call again. This time he answers, again, dead air. But then he hears breathing, and it was like kind of like a struggled breathing, but not too much. But he thought he recognized it, which he said sounded, like unhinged at the moment, but he thought he could recognize who it was. So he goes home to visit. He was a student at U of L at the time. He goes home and his mom has all this paperwork out and she's like looking through the numbers. Well, he walks by and he recognizes like his dad's number. And then it clicks to him, the number that had been calling him. It was not his dad's number. It was the exact same number, except it was off by 1, just 1 number, the very last number. So now he's like really freaked out. He tells his sister about it, asks if she's been getting any kind of phone calls. She had not. Neither had her mom. It was just him. This goes on for months. It had been happening so often. And while he was at school, he wasn't really like paying attention to any kind of patterns. But then he screenshotted the number to send to his sister, and he was like, oh, it's still going on, it's still happening. And she noticed that it was happening every night at 11:47. So they were trying to figure out like what's going on with 11:47, and that wasn't the time that he passed or anything like that. More months pass. The brother's looking through old videos and he finds a video of his dad at Christmas, and his dad was like talking to him, saying all kinds of like silly stuff or whatever, and he was standing in front of the microwave, and on the microwave was 11:47. So as soon as he put like 2 and 2 together to figure out like, okay, this is my dad that's trying to contact me, and he just said that he said out loud like, okay, Dad, I see you, I see that it's you that's calling. Never got another call. I get emails about this kind of thing happening all the time. It's always like phone calls or voicemails. I've got some more that I'm going to share soon. So has this ever happened to you? Because you have to admit that.
I found home videos of my family that shouldn't exist. My brother died when I was 7 years old. He was 13. He drowned in the lake down the street from our house. My parents never touched his room. They tried once, but they couldn't do it. It was too raw. After that, the door just stayed shut. His room became a kind of museum of him. That was 11 years ago. His room still looks the same. This morning, while I was packing for college, I thought I'd finally go in there. My plan wasn't anything dramatic. I just wanted to grab a few hoodies, maybe a keepsake or 2 to take with me. Something to hold on to when I got homesick. Full transparency, I've been in his room plenty of times before. I've sat on his bed. I've looked through the shelves, but I've never really done any digging. That felt wrong. And really, I had no inclination to. I just missed my brother. That wasn't my intention today either. It wasn't my intention to find a stack of DVDs shoved into the bottom drawer of his dresser. There were 3 of them, just labelled 1, 2, and 3. The only DVD player in the house is still hooked up to his old TV. Everything else went streaming years ago. For a minute, I told myself not to do it. They weren't mine. They probably didn't matter. I picked up some of the items I'd collected, put the DVDs back in his drawer, and returned to my room. Tonight, they started calling to me. It felt physical, a pull in my chest. I crept back across the hall. I slipped into his room, I locked the door behind me so my parents wouldn't hear, and I put in the first DVD. It was a home video. I didn't even know we had any. I don't remember my parents ever owning a camera. The video starts with static, then clears just enough to show something. The picture's muddy, warped. It could be the living room, but the furniture looks wrong. Everything's too big or too small, shifting every time the frame jitters. Sometimes it almost looks like a bedroom, sometimes like a hallway. No faces, no clear shapes, just flickering shadows that don't match what the voices are saying. Because there are voices, familiar ones. Laughter, clinking dishes, and my mum calling my brother's name. It sounds like my family in the background, just out of sight. I hear my own brother's laughter, and the sound swallows me whole. It rings through my head, bouncing off the bones that make up my skull. Then, beneath it, is another voice. Low, deliberate, close enough that you couldn't miss it. You haven't noticed yet. Then the video cut off. Just like that. You haven't noticed yet. What? I scrambled to replay it, not even thinking about the other 2 discs still stacked under the TV. I just wanted to hear him laugh again. I tried not to think about the end, but the fear of it was crawling up my spine as I hit play. Because the way it spoke, it sounded like it wasn't part of the recording at all. Like someone was speaking to the camera, to me. I pressed play again. This time, pausing every few seconds. Desperate to make sense of what I was seeing, but nothing held still. Everything on the film looked almost familiar, like a room you swear you've been in but you can't quite place. The walls are a little too narrow, and the colours are washed out enough to make it something you've never seen before. It made me feel like my brain was short-circuiting. Then I froze the frame just before the moment he laughed. There it was. A caption. Faint and yellow, burnt into the corner of the screen. July 30th, 2015. 7 months after my brother drowned. My first thought was it was a glitch. There had to be. The camera must have been off by a year. There's no other explanation. I forced myself to breathe and to shove back the rising panic. Then I pressed play again. His laugh filled the room, and for a second, my fear washed away. It was just him again. He was alive, he was warm, present. A bittersweet rush of comfort and grief came over me. But then the voice returned. But it was closer this time. Broken and cutting in and out like static. You noticed. I ripped the DVD out of the player and threw it across the room. I don't even know why I did it. Adrenaline, I guess. My hands were shaking so hard I couldn't control myself. I'm trying to think of logical explanations. I want to believe there's one. But every reason I come up with feels paper thin. I just bolted back to my room, dove under the covers, like that would help. I don't want to watch the other videos. I don't. But I can feel them pulling at me like they're not finished. Like I owe them something. I can't sleep. It's dark. It's late. The rain just started. The bathroom faucet always drips, but tonight it sounds louder. You could almost confuse it for footsteps.
Growing up, did any of you guys have parents that told you to stay away from train tracks? Because if you grew up in New Jersey, then you know exactly what I'm talking about. It's a place called the Viaduct. The story takes place when I was about 19 years old, and it was me, my sister, and a few of our friends. And it was a regular weekend where we would flip a page in the Weird New Jersey book, and this weekend we ended up on the Viaduct. Now, I'm going to be honest with you. I don't really know the legend of that place, and we didn't really know the legend of that place at the time. We just knew that it was going to be a really cool and creepy place to explore. So here's how our experience went down. We literally went there just for the simple fact that it was a daredevil type of situation. Like, we liked the fact that it was so high up and it was just such an adrenaline rush to like run across. Little did we know that we were going to end up walking into a situation where, unfortunately, many years prior, there was a boy who apparently had jumped off to himself. And the way that we found that out was there was stuff spray painted on the walls, supposedly in the section where the boy had jumped off. And what was spray painted on the walls literally just said, "Don't jump." That's not the scary part, you guys. The scary part is we didn't see that first. A couple things that actually happened first before we saw that. One of them was the simple fact that me and my sister and our friends, like, we were all drinking at the time, okay? And we were crawling through the vents because it was like a curved arch like this, and you could crawl through. And my sister literally was so drunk that she slipped and fell all the way down to the bottom, and if I didn't catch her, she would have been the next one to fall off that bridge. And I tell you that part just to give you a little bit of perspective on how dangerous that place actually was. But as I pick her up, we're walking down the bridge through the arches, we're crawling all over it, and we literally run into this boy. I felt so bad for this kid because he just looked so straggly, so depressed, so like he just looked so lost, and he was standing like right on the edge of the viaduct. Now mind you, we didn't know if this kid was gonna jump or we didn't know what he was gonna do, but I can tell you that we saw him. He looked at us and he turned back around and faced view as if like he was going to jump. That's when me and my sister looked at each other, and then we looked back at our friends who were far behind us, and we were all like, dude, we think this kid's gonna jump. So immediately we turned back around to face him because we were gonna walk up to him and talk to him to see if he had any type of intention. But the scariest thing about this is he wasn't there when we turned back around. Both of us were looking at each other like really confused, and then our friends catch up to us and they're like, what's wrong with you two? And we were like, you didn't see, like there was a person literally standing right there on the edge, like they were gonna jump. And then when we looked back to get you guys, we turned around and they just were gone. So to double check to see if this person jumped, we literally walked over to the edge and looked down, and we didn't see anything though. That was when we all started freaking out, like, dude, tell me we were just we were like, maybe we're intoxicated, we were just hallucinating that. But that's when we ended up going up and exploring more, and then we found that thing spray painted on the wall, don't jump. I don't know about you guys, but I just added all of that together, and it was really hard for me not to think like that those two things went together. I don't know, because I don't exactly know the legend of that place, but I do know that I still think about it till this day. And if y'all had any crazy experiences doing weird New Jersey stuff or anything like that, put them down in the comments, y'all. I would love to hear them.
There was this story about this guy named Mark. Mark and his brother were cave explorers, and one particular time they find themselves in Utah in Zion National Park. And they came across this stream, and the stream led into this good-sized cave. So they go into the cave and they start following this stream, and it starts to turn into a larger like river that's underground. And as they made their way from all these different chambers of the cave and they followed this body of water, it became more and more turbulent. And eventually the cave basically stopped, and the water kind of went under into another cavern that was completely submerged. So Mark and his brother knew they couldn't go any further. However, to the side, they find this other tunnel. And the entrance to it was sort of about 5.5 feet tall. So Mark and his brother, they decide to see where this cave would lead. So they go into it, and it started to get a little lower and a little lower. And soon they found themselves on their knees. And then eventually it got smaller to the point where now they were crawling on their hands and knees. And eventually the cave gets to where it's, several inches. And Mark's brother's like, we should probably turn back. It's too dangerous, too risky. We could get stuck. But Mark's like, no, I just want to push a little further and see what is up ahead. So Mark goes on forward, and he's now like on his stomach, and he's basically, crawling, wiggling his way through this tight crevice. And it kind of came to this little opening, and it dropped down and it went into another cave. And then it dropped down and it went into another cave. Well, he said eventually it got to a point where he couldn't go any further. But it was so tight that the only way he could get out of there was just sort of to wiggle backwards, because he couldn't turn around. So he starts just kind of wiggling his way out. And as he backed up, he didn't realize that he went into another cave that he didn't see. And he ends up finding himself in a tighter space than he was before. And eventually he gets stuck to the point where he can't move. And it was really, really tight. But the worst of his problems were far from over, because he starts to feel liquid on his feet. He knew there was water. And that's when it occurred to him, it must be raining outside, and this thing is going to start to flood. And I'm stuck here in this tight crevice. So he starts trying to wiggle and trying to get out, but he's just very, very stuck. And so he starts screaming for his brother. And he kind of hears his brother, but it's very muffled to the point where he can't understand him. And he doesn't think that his brother can make out what he's saying. So he knows he's basically stuck there. And all these thoughts just start going through his head, like, what's going to happen? I'm going to, drown. And he starts panicking, feeling claustrophobic. And he doesn't realize, like, is he up? Is he down? He kind of loses his sense of where he is at. And he said the water just slowly rose and rose. And eventually it gets up to his hips. And something about that water must have helped him, because he was able to loosen himself enough to where he could get out and he could go forward. And he ended up making it out of this tight crevice and back into an area where it was a little wider. And right at that moment, he sees this cave that he was just in fill up with water. And he makes it out just at the right time. He finds his brother and they get out of there. But he said the scariest part about all of it was he was thinking how that water just, ran into another cavern that was submerged. And he kind of just wondered, like, where did that water even go? Like, how deep does it go? And he thought, if they fell into that water, the current would basically just continuously take them down deep into the earth. What is it about a full moon that makes people go mad? Ask anyone who works the night shift, and they will tell you if it's a full moon, then it's going to be a very long, creepy night. Now, there was this man named Luis. Luis was an Uber driver from Mesa, Arizona. One Friday night, while he was working a shift, he gets a request for a ride out in Apache Junction. And he knew that it was going to be a big score because he was going to make a lot of money off this ride. So he accepts it. He heads out to Apache Junction to the location on his phone. But it takes him out on this desert road and it tells him to stop. So he looks at the person he's supposed to pick up. It's an older Native American man. And sure enough, standing off in the desert is this Native American man with this long black hair, headband, this cut-off t-shirt, and these blue jeans. He said this guy just walked over to the vehicle and he goes, hey, I'm Louise, I'm your Uber driver. Are you so-and-so? And he, confirms this is the person he's supposed to pick up. So he said the guy got in the car and he had this bag with him and he set it down next to him. And as they started to drive and head towards Phoenix, he said this guy gave him this weird vibe. But once again, he knew this was a big score. He would make a lot of money off this. So he said, I just need to get him to Phoenix. Now, as he's driving, he tried to have a conversation with this guy, but he could tell he didn't like to talk. And he said he just kind of sat there in the back with this grin on his face, just looking forward. So they get into the Phoenix metro area. And he figures out where this guy's supposed to go. So he gets them to this house on the outskirts of town, and it's this trailer. The guy says, just stop right here and let me out. So he stops the car. The guy gets out, and he walks all the way up to the trailer and gets in. Louise is about ready to pull off when he notices this guy has left his bag in the back seat. So he grabs the bag and he gets out of the vehicle and he makes his way towards the trailer. Well, one thing he noticed about the trailer is it was completely dark. There were no lights around it. There were no lights on inside. And so he was kind of freaked out. as he gets a little closer, he started to hear this howling. It sounded almost like a coyote or a dog or something. So he makes his way to the door of this trailer, and he can see the doors open. And as he looks through the screen, he sees this dog. It's very large, completely black, covered in lots of fur. He said this dog was just kind of pacing back and forth in the trailer. And so he slowly knocks on the door and is like, "Hey, it's your Uber driver, you left your bag." He said that's when he heard sort of this creaking sound. He said that's when the dog came over to the door. Didn't bark. It didn't act like, a normal dog would. He said the dog walks up to the screen door, and when it lifted up his head, he said it had the face of the man that he had given a ride. So he throws the bag down and he takes off running back to his vehicle, and he jumps in and he leaves. And as he gets home, he said all he could think about is how that dog had the face of a man.
Somebody submitted a spooky story saying that this is how they discovered that their auntie was a Lugawu. I am back with another spooky story. We're gonna call the person who submitted this story Coco. Coco says that her auntie is like your average woman. She has a family, she has a husband, she has kids of her own, and she is a God-fearing woman as far as everybody knew. She would go to church every Sunday, lead prayer groups. Her auntie apparently had a dark secret. So Coco's auntie moved into her neighborhood when she was about 13 years old. Maybe after a few months of her being in the neighborhood, weird things started going on. Things that's never happened before. Things that people have heard in stories started happening. Like people would be chilling outside, they would look up and see fire on top of a tree, but the tree itself is not burning. At night, people reported to hearing something crawling or walking aggressively on their roofs, and this would keep people up at night. Just very, very weird activities. There would be just random animals showing up at people's doors, but it was nothing crazy enough for people to investigate until there was this woman in the neighborhood that auntie grew really close with. They hung out all the time, they went to church together, and by the way, this woman was expecting, she was pregnant. Auntie was helping take care of this woman throughout her pregnancy. Nobody questioned or thought anything of it. Auntie was even there when she gave birth to her child. So a few weeks after giving birth, at night, the baby would just start crying. And this baby would have this terrible fever. Again, it seems like during the day, the baby is perfectly fine. But at night, the baby is burning up and crying. While all of this is happening, they can hear something crawling on the roof. It was almost like clockwork every night. And it looked like this baby was literally losing life force. Some people told the neighbor like, this sounds like a Lugawu. People would get together and pray for the baby, but without failure at night, the baby was just getting worser. Word is starting to spread in the neighborhood. Some people were really afraid, and some of them had children, so they needed to catch this Lugawu before things got bad. Things slowed down for a little bit in the neighborhood. For a good 3 months, it was nothing. Nothing was going on. So people are starting to reacclimate, thinking that this Lugawu is gone. So a few months later, another kid from the neighborhood that was about 5 years old just slept walk out of his house in the middle of the night, and no one saw him. They all went searching for the kid, but nobody could find him. Weirdly enough, later that night, the little boy comes running back home. He was so distraught, and again, he's a kid. What he's saying is barely making sense, but he's implying that auntie took him. Now people are on edge. People in the neighborhood decided to stop talking about the Lugawu in large groups. One day, they secretly concocted a plan. Certain people decided to stay up at night and see what would happen. And lo and behold, they saw this fiery creature land on a rooftop. Without even giving it a second thought. Without a thought, they started attacking this creature, throwing rocks, anything they can find. Creature made this horrifying noise that Coco says she still remembers till this day. However, the creature took off. Well, the following day, auntie gets up, she had to go about her business, and she looks bruised up. She was limping. She had bandages wrapped like literally all over her body. The night before, they attacked the creature. Now people are looking at auntie like, and before everybody can come together to confront her, she fled. She left her whole entire family and fled. And that's how everybody discovered that Auntie, the church lady, was the Lugawu. If you have a spooky story that you want me to tell, feel free to submit it to me right here on TikTok or on Instagram DMs. That's at the end of all of my story times. I love you, my abducted humans, from your favorite Haitian homegirl.
Have you heard of the fake house theory? So there's these people who believe that the cities and towns that we live in are not as big as we actually think. And that within these cities and towns, there are these fake houses and fake businesses that are sort of put there as props. And you know, as I started to think about it more, I live in a town of 10,000 people. But in the past 7 years that I've been here, I've probably only encountered a couple hundred people. And when I've lived in other cities, right, the amount of people that I've seen has been very limited, very small. So are our cities and towns actually much smaller? Like, are there all these empty houses that are just essentially props and businesses that don't exist? And basically we are living in one big lie. Now, it's easy to get under the illusion of the actual size of a town or city. Because when you think about it, if you go to a stadium, right? When you see that stadium packed, it looks like there's 1 million people there. But they can only hold up to like 60, 80,000. But to you, it appears like that's millions and millions of people. And so it would be easy to be deceived and think, oh, this town has millions of people, or, you know, this city has millions of people, but I only see so many people all the time. So what do you think? Are we living in cities and towns that are fake?
Let's do one more story about something spooky happening in the woods. This came from Richard, and he says he was hunted by what he believes to be the apex predator near where he used to live in the panhandle of Idaho, about 50 miles south of the Canadian border. And he's still not sure what this apex predator is, but strangely enough, it started respecting him and leaving him gifts when he started leaving it offerings. A little bit of background on Richard. He said he is very competent in the woods. He spent the majority of his adult life as a combat and wilderness survival instructor. Also been an outfitter and avid backpacker, spending weeks at a time in the woods. Been a wilderness hunting and fishing fly guide, and spent the majority of his life in the backcountry of several Pacific Northwest states and California. All of that is just a lot of words to describe the way that Richard thinks. He said he has always laughed anytime people tell him about creepy or unexplained things that happened in the woods, because he can always find a logical explanation. He said he's heard about every cryptid and urban legend that exists in those woods, and he can find a natural cause for all of those stories. For example, if you've never heard a red fox's call and you hear it without knowing what you're listening to, it will turn your blood cold. He said, look it up. Still has no explanation for what he encountered when he moved to an off-grid homestead with his family a few years ago. The property was surrounded by thousands and thousands of forested acres, and he said his family owned about 80 acres of that, but he had permission from the owners of the surrounding areas, and he spent most of his days out hunting or foraging for wild mushrooms. And one day, one of his friends came over about 6 months after his family moved in, and he points at a structure in the trees across the street from Richard's property, and he says, "That's a Bigfoot structure." Richard said he really respected his friend. He's also an avid outdoorsman, but he didn't believe in Bigfoot. But he knew that this friend of his, who, despite knowing the woods like the back of his hand, spent a lot of his free time researching Bigfoot and even leading expeditions to try to find him, or at least prove his existence. It's like, a hobby's a hobby, you know, whatever floats his boat, it's just not my cup of tea. And he kind of laughs this off. And his friend's like, I know you don't believe me, but they put those up to mark their territory, and you should avoid going over into that part of the woods. But Richard said he was absolutely right. He did ignore his warning, and he continued going into that patch of woods to forage for wild mushrooms. It was one of his prime areas where he would gather and find things he needed for the homestead. Day that spring, he packed up his things and he headed out to find the first mushrooms of the season. He said it was still cold enough that there were a few patches of snow on the ground, but he headed to that area. Toward a spot where he knew that they grew thick, and he found it, and they were there as he expected, and he started picking. But after a few minutes, he felt extremely disoriented. This was very unusual for me because I knew those woods like the back of my hand, and I was just out of sight of my pasture fence. He shook his head and decided to play it safe because after years of hearing search and rescue stories, he knew that he should head back to where he could see his fence and knew where he was. He headed back toward the direction from which he came, but he still felt lost. He said the plants were right, but the topography of the earth was all wrong. Even though he was alone, he felt lost and confused and embarrassed. He said normally I was the guy that was called when somebody was lost, and here I was, lost on my own property. After wandering for a few more minutes and still unable to figure out where he was, he decided to try an old trick that an old Cherokee man he called Grandpa taught him. And he said that this trick is to bend over and look between your legs toward the direction from which you came, and all of a sudden you will know where you're at. He said, I don't know how or why it works, but it does. So he tried that, it did work, and he all of a sudden knew where he was again. As he started to head back toward his pasture, he saw another patch of mushrooms, and he was like, well, I may as well grab these while I'm out here. And he started picking. And before he knew it, about another hour had passed. And that's when he heard a rustling in the trees, and he was aware that he was being hunted by something. He said he has been hunted by mountain lions in the past, and it's a very unsettling feeling, but he did not go out unprepared. He did have his firearm. He didn't think that whatever was hunting him this time was a mountain lion because it was midday and they're not usually out at that hour. But he figured out which direction it was coming from and headed in that direction because he said strategy says that you should meet an ambush. You shouldn't run from it. You should let whatever's hunting you see that you know it's there. As he headed in that direction, he caught sight of what he thought was a bear standing behind a tree, but he said it wasn't the right shape of a bear, but that's the only thing that made sense in my brain. Whatever it was standing on two legs and it was tall. He looked down to check the position of his firearm, and when he looked up, the thing was gone. He made his way over to the tree to look at the tracks, and he said he was very confused because whatever tracks it was wasn't a bear, but he had never seen anything like it. He heard another noise coming from the tree line, and so he turned in that direction, drew his firearm, and charged. And he said the speed at which this thing ran from him was crazy. It crashed through the bushes. He actually spent a few hours tracking it, though he never caught sight of it again. Eventually, though, it got dark, and he said he headed back. He said he would have liked to figure out what he was tracking. That thing was undoubtedly bigger and stronger and could see better in the dark than he could. He was feeling unsettled by the time he reached his house and locked up the house, even though they lived in an area where he said that's not really necessary. And he did not sleep well that night. But in the morning, he got up, he fed his kids, and he headed outside to chop some wood. He headed to a large stack of rounds that he had next to a property fence, but when he got out there, he was very confused because on the rounds of wood was a large cluster of the types of mushrooms he had been hunting the day before. There were so many that he was able to fill 3 5-gallon buckets with this type of mushroom. He said he checked them out carefully to make sure that they were the type that he had been looking for because some of the mushrooms in that family are poisonous, but he was sure. He picked them and he was very confused because he hadn't noticed them the day before, but was like, maybe they sprung up and I just missed them somehow. Later that day, he called his friend, the one that was super into Bigfoot, and he was telling him about what he was tracking in the woods the day before, and he was like, do you know what kind of animal that could have been? And his friend's like, oh, I don't know. I've never heard of anything like that. And then Richard tells him about the mushrooms, and his friend gets really excited, and he's like, oh my gosh, they left you an offering. He said you have to leave them an offering back so they know that you're peaceful. He says they really like guts and innards and things like that. And Richard says, I don't know about all that, but he was curious. So the next week, they did have some leftovers from an animal. And so he says he took them out there and he put them on the other side of the fence from the stack of wood that he had been chopping a week prior. And out the next morning to check to see if anything had gotten it, he was shocked because the offering was gone, but in its place was another cluster of mushrooms. This went on for months. Anytime Richard had something extra to spare, he would leave it by the fence and he would find gifts left in return. He said whatever this was far more intelligent than any animal I've ever encountered. He and his family noticed that whenever they were outside on their property, they would all feel the same sensation of being watched, not by one creature, but by many. He said it never felt aggressive, and it went on for several years until eventually, sadly, his marriage fell apart and they seemed to leave. He says to this day, he's not exactly sure what was living on his property and watching his family. But when he hears stories about strange things happening in the woods, he's not as skeptical as he used to be. That I believe now that there are things out there beyond my understanding. But whatever relationship I developed with whatever was on my property was cool, and I'm grateful for that experience. He said it felt like our homestead was, for a period, guarded by the apex predator of that area, even though I'm not sure what that was. Richard's his real name. He'll be seeing the comments. Let him know what you think. And he's curious if anyone has any other stories, especially from this area, dealing with something like this, or if you've ever heard about leaving an offering and then something leaving you a gift in exchange. If you have a story for Spooky Scary Storytime, one that you think nobody else would believe, send it in. We'd love to hear it.
There was this truck driver who was driving south of Tucumcari one night. And as he's going down the highway, he notices this dog. And it runs right in front of his truck. And at the last minute, he swerves out of the way and nearly misses this thing. Well, him being a dog lover, he pulls his truck to the side of the road and he decides, I'm going to go look for this thing and see if it's all right. So he gets out of his truck and he goes off down into the desert and he starts yelling like, here boy, here boy. And that's when he sees this black dog that looks sort of like a German Shepherd. And he starts calling to the dog, but he can tell this dog is kind of timid and shy. So he thinks to himself, I can't leave this dog out here in the middle of the desert. Like, it needs water, it needs food, and it's probably in bad shape. So he goes to the passenger side of his truck and he opens up the door. The dog comes over and it jumps up in the truck. So he goes around and he gets in the driver's side, and he looks and sees that this dog has went into the cab and is like hiding under the bed. So he starts the truck up and he starts driving. Well, after a while, he said this dog started to let out these growls. And he thought maybe it was hurt or it was sick, but he knew he wasn't too far from Tucumcari. But then this dog started to cough. And he said it sounded like it was choking. But those chokes started to sound like, almost like he was trying to push out words. Like, hello, And after a while, this dog was speaking and it was talking. And so he turns his head, he looks into the cab, and there is the dog under the seat, and it has bright red eyes. So he stops the truck immediately and he jumps out, and he calls up dispatch and tells them, I can't drive the truck anymore. Like, there's this sick dog in my vehicle and it's acting strange. Right as he's talking to dispatch, he looks over at the truck driver's side. The door is open. He sees this man jump out of the truck and take off running into the desert. So he jumps back in his truck and he hauls it to Tucumcari. And he started to think, maybe I just am tired and I've been driving too long. But for weeks, his car, the cab of his truck, smelled like rotten meat. There was this truck driver who was driving near Texarkana. And he said one night he gets a call on his CB radio. It was another trucker who said, I'm at mile marker 181 and I've had an accident and I need some assistance. Can you help me? Anyone that's nearby? So he radios back, I'm 15 minutes away. I will come there and, assist you. So he drives to mile marker 181. But he's shocked because when he gets there, he doesn't see a truck or anything. So he pulls his truck off to the side of the road and he gets out. And he thinks maybe this truck has went into a ditch or way off the road. So he grabs his flashlight and he starts looking around. But he doesn't see anything. There's no trucks. That's when he starts hearing this sound. It's like a moan, a groan. And he turns his light towards this sound and he sees this man. He looks in bad shape. He's bruised, he's bleeding, and he's sort of walking with a limp. And so he says, sir, let me help you. My truck's right here. Get in the truck and I'll call for help. But the guy didn't say anything. He just let out this moan. And he said, sir, are you all right? Like, what's going on? And he didn't say anything. He said that's when all of a sudden this guy just started screaming. And so he takes off running back to his truck. And right as he gets next to his truck, he trips over something. And when he looks down at what he tripped over, he sees this cross with a picture. And it's a picture of the man he just saw. And he knows there's been an accident there. And that person probably passed away. So he jumped back in his truck and he got out of there. One place that I've always been creeped out by is northern Minnesota. It is like a whole other world. And there are strange, anomalous things that happen in the north woods of Minnesota. Now, there was this girl named Star. Star and her friends were driving on a highway north of Bemidji when they seen this person standing in the middle of the road. And at the time, they thought it was strange because they were far away from any town or city. And it was a pretty rural, remote area. So to see this man standing in the road, they were kind of confused. So Star slows down the vehicle. And off about 100 feet is this man just standing there. Now, they couldn't make out what he looked like. He was very dark. And they almost just seen the shadow or the outline of this person. But they said he started to move. And he was taking these big, long steps towards their vehicle. And as he proceeded a little closer, Star turns on high beams to get a better look at him. But as soon as the light hits this guy, he drops to the ground on all fours and he starts running towards their vehicle. Now, Star puts the car into reverse and she starts going backwards. And this person begins to chase their vehicle on all fours as they're driving backwards. And eventually, this man just takes off into the woods. And so Star puts the car into park. And they just sit there for a couple minutes. They're all kind of like, what was that? When they look over to the left side of the vehicle, they see a set of red eyes staring at them. So Star puts the car into drive and she takes off out of there. Later that night, she arrives at home and she's still pretty shooken up. She can't get that out of her mind, what she had just experienced. So as she goes up to her bedroom, she puts on the TV for a little bit. Well, she starts to eventually get tired. So she gets up out of bed and she goes to turn the TV off. But in the meantime, she looks out the window and she sees one of her friends who was with her earlier that night standing outside. So she goes over to the window, she opens it up and she goes, what are you doing? Why are you at my house? And the person didn't say anything. So she thinks, okay, well, I can't be yelling out my window. I'm going to go outside and talk to him. So she starts to go out her bedroom door, but then she thinks, okay, something is weird about this. So she calls up her friend who answers the phone and explains to her that he is at home. He is not at her house. And when she runs back to the window, she sees this person walking back into the woods.
Oh my gosh, this story that I just came across, I had to share it immediately. And stick around for the ending, I cannot imagine. A little girl who was 5 or 6 years old had just finished a vacation with her grandparents in Florida. They had a great time on their trip. There was nothing wrong, nothing weird, just a really good time with family. But now it was time to go home. So they get to the airport and they go through security and they get up to the gate. And they're all starting to head onto the plane and the little girl stops. She says her tummy hurts and she doesn't want to get on the plane. So they're trying to encourage her and tell her it's okay and lead her into the plane, and she will not move. She says her tummy hurts really bad when she thinks about getting on the plane. Now, mind you, this is not a child who is afraid to fly. In fact, she has flown many times before. No history of anxiety, no meltdowns on the plane, nothing. And this came out of nowhere, and the grandparents are thinking, oh, she's just being a kid. I mean, she's like 6, right? This is sometimes how kids act. But they were going to miss their flight, so they're trying everything. They're trying to bribe her, then beg her, anything to get this little girl on this plane. and she would not move. She flat out refuses to get on the plane. But they didn't want to cause a scene, so they missed their flight, and they went and booked another one. Now, while all this is happening, back home, the little girl's mother, she's at work. So she takes her break and there's a TV and the news is on. And then she hears something that grabs her attention. She hears the news reporter say that a flight has gone down out of Florida. It had gone down approximately 10 minutes after takeoff and it crashed in the Everglades. She feels her entire body go cold. She continues to listen, and the reporter goes on to say, given the timing and the altitude of the crash, the likelihood of anybody surviving this crash is already slim to none. And even if someone had made it through, the authorities determined that they would not survive what came next, because it was the Everglades, the wildlife, the alligators. They opted to not even send a rescue team. It was too dangerous and not worth risking their lives. And then they released the flight number. It was their flight. So obviously, the mother loses her mind. She is at work. She is shaking. There are no cell phones at the time. It was the 90s. And then she tries to contact the airport, and they will not give her any information out at the moment. Not about who was on the flight, who might not have been, nothing. She leaves work in shock, and she goes home, and she just grieves. And she sits there all evening, completely convinced that her parents and her baby are gone. Just sinking feeling over and over again that she will never see them again. And then at midnight, after what seemed like an eternity, the phone rings. And it's Grandpa, and he's calm, completely casual. And he was just calling her to let her know that they're still at the airport and that they had to book a later flight. But rest assured, they'll be home soon. Guys, he was completely unaware of the plane crash because the airport deliberately kept it quiet. You know, hush hush, because they didn't want anyone freaking out and not getting on their flights. Okay, so the mother is sobbing. She can barely get the words out, and she explains to him how the flight that they were supposed to be on had crashed. And they had no idea. They were just sitting in the airport for hours waiting. No clue. And they missed their flight all because a little girl had a tummy ache. And listen to this. It gets even crazier. The mother did not tell that little girl about that whole event until she was well into her adult years. And I'm talking 2 decades later, after both of her grandparents passed away. That little girl had gone her entire life thinking that that was some kind of a dream or something she saw on television. She had no idea it was real, no idea that she and she alone saved their lives. So when she finally learned of this, she looked it up and she read every single detail that she could find, knowing exactly what would have happened to her and her grandparents had she not stopped. And she would go on and think about the horrors of even if they would have survived the alligators and trying to navigate through that headspace. Just freaking crazy. They would not have walked out of those swamps. There was no surviving that. So what do you guys think of that? I mean, I feel like that was a little bit more than just a tummy ache. Like, she knew something subconsciously. Was it the work of God, a guardian angel, just a little girl's wonderful intuition, or just a real big coincidence and an upset tummy? I don't know, but I do know it wasn't nothing. All right, guys, drop your thoughts in the comments. I am genuinely curious of what you think. And tell me, have you ever had a gut feeling or an inner knowing that turned out to come true? I think that this happens a lot more than people realize or talk about. If you have a creepy story of your own, you gotta share it. There is an email in my bio. And if you're new here, definitely follow for more creepy story time.
Y'all already know the drill. If I am going to be scared, you are going to be scared with me. I am Autumn in Appalachia, and it is time for another spooky story. Make sure to add me on Facebook and subscribe on YouTube. Same handle. Without further ado. This story comes from Callie. I'll be tagging her in this video. Y'all buckle up because this one freaked me the hell out, and it gets worse the further it goes on. Callie said from the ages of 12 to 17, she was in an apartment with her mom about 30 minutes outside of Atlanta, Georgia. Now, while here, she went through a lot of paranormal activity, some of which absolutely traumatized her, but she said she felt like there were two main entities in her home. One, she said, when she was around 14, she nicknamed it Spirit, and she didn't necessarily feel like it had negative energy, but that's not to say it didn't still scare her. The second thing she believes was a mimic, and that thing had sinister energy. So with this spirit entity that she nicknamed, when she was about 14 years old, she said that she would frequently, if she was sitting in her bedroom down the hallway, at the end of the hallway is her kitchen, she would hear from this kitchen what sounded like somebody, like an actual person in there, making noise, like walking around, hearing things move, and it would always turn out that nobody's in there. She's like home alone. And so sometimes she would actually yell out like, "Hey, you're scaring me, knock it off." And whatever this was, it had sentience because it actually responded to her and it quit. Now, one day this happens and she decides to firk around and find out. She said, "Okay, come here." And she hears she said like 5 seconds after she said that, she hears something walking down the hallway to her room. And she said it sounded like, imagine if somebody was wearing socks and they were like walking on carpet. That little kind of scuffling sound, along with like the thuds of actual footsteps. Now, before it gets to her door, she like panics and she's like, stop. And it does. So it was things like this with this entity that she nicknamed Spirit that would happen. And she said that sometimes as well, she would be in her room and she always had the feeling of like never being alone. Like there's always something watching. Well, there's this particular chair in her room, and anytime she sat in it, she said that she got this overwhelming feeling that something is literally right behind her, like looming over her shoulder. And what freaked her out was that her cat always responded to it. This was like her childhood cat. She had her for years, and we know our animals, right? She said that anytime she was like sitting in that chair, if she got that feeling, she'd look over to gauge her cat's reaction, and her cat would be like alert, like very clearly looking behind her, like freaked out. Anytime there was a noise, if there was like a presence that she felt, her cat would be looking in the same direction, or her ears would perk up and she'd like turn her head. And so this happened frequently. Eventually, something in the house escalates and things got darker. So one day she gets off the school bus. She does not take off her shoes. She doesn't take her backpack off. As soon as she gets off that bus, she runs into the house, goes straight to the bathroom because she has to pee really bad. After 3 minutes or so, she's done. She comes out of the bathroom, and her mom, who's standing in the kitchen, looks at her confused. And she's like, "Didn't you come out of the bathroom a few minutes ago?" And she's like, "No, I've been in here the whole time." And her mom's like, "That is weird because I swear a few minutes ago I saw you come out of the bathroom. I turned around and I said hello. You ignored me and went into your bedroom." And she's like, "Mom, that is not possible because I literally got off the bus and went straight to the bathroom. Like, I've not been to my room. I didn't come out of the bathroom until just now." And so she tries her best to like overlook it or think it's just some sort of a misunderstanding. Her mom was confused. Well, a few days after this, Callie said she is in her bedroom and she hears something in the kitchen. She comes into the kitchen and she sees that the freezer door is like cracked. She thinks that's kind of weird, but she shuts the freezer door and she starts kind of looking through the fridge for something to eat when she hears her mom from her bedroom, and she can tell it's her mom saying something, but she can't understand what she said. So she's like, "Hey, what?" And there's no response. She waits a second and then she's like, "Mom, what did you need?" No response again. So she walks into her mom's bedroom to like see what she needed. Nobody's in there. She looks through the house. Her mom is nowhere to be found. And that is when she has a gut-wrenching realization that she is home alone and her mom is still at work. To this day, she doesn't know who was talking to her from her mom's bedroom, but she said it sounded just like her mom. Another night around 1 a.m., she is up by herself. She is sitting on the end of her bed and she's going through a bag that she has. Now, that chair that's in her room, she said that without warning, it had been completely quiet. Without warning, this chair flies off of the ground and hits the ceiling with such impact that it literally left like marks and dents in the ceiling. She actually said she has a picture of this still, and she's not updated me with the picture so far. If she does, I'm sure she'll post it in the comments, or I will if she ends up sending that. But it absolutely terrified her, like scared the shit out of her. And she, at this point, is so scared to sleep like alone at night or just be by herself in her room. She's like constantly hearing noises. She feels like she's being watched. Whatever this other energy is that is popping up is malevolent, and it seems to have like ill intention for her. She starts sleeping at night with her guy best friend on the phone with her. Like they would, I don't know if they're like phone calling, FaceTiming, whatever, but they would literally do that just because it is the only thing she knew to cope with and helped her sleep. So one night she's doing this, she wakes up the next morning and she's not on the line with him anymore, but she has a string of text messages from him, and her stomach drops when she starts reading these messages because he was saying like, who is that in your room? Are you okay? Like, what was that? And so she texts back and she's like, dude, like, what are you talking about? He said that he had also with her like dozed off on the phone, and in the middle of the night he is woken up by the sound of this like deep, gravelly, like male voice on the other end of the phone, like coming from Callie's room, and he has no idea what's going on, and it freaked him out. And she's trying in her mind as he's saying this to debunk it, but she said that like she did used to sleep with her TV on, but it's solely for the light, and she always muted the TV. She had the TV on that night, but it's muted. There's no sound coming from it. There's no man in her house. There's no music playing. She never even woke up. Like, she never heard it, but it like really shook up her best friend. So eventually they move out of this apartment into a house, and there was a period of time after the move where Callie said that she started having sleep paralysis, and what she saw during the sleep paralysis, she said, is out of everything what traumatized her, like petrified her beyond means. So there was this woman that would appear to her that had like sharp teeth. She said that she had black eyes. She had a white dress on. She had long, dark, scraggly hair, and her skin was gray, and that she was genuinely the most evil, like terrifying thing you could possibly imagine. She said it kind of looked like, if you've ever heard of La Llorona, but a little different. And she had like very long, jagged, sharp teeth. And this happened over and over and over again. She could not get away from it. And she said that the first time that it happened, when she was finally able to get out of the paralysis, somehow knew that this woman, quote unquote, her name was Sarah. And this made no sense to her. Like, that's such a random thing, but she said that somehow she just knew this, and she doesn't know if maybe like during the paralysis or something, the woman like said her name and there's like some sort of a memory gap, and she just doesn't remember that particular part of the paralysis episode. But she actually started trying to do research online, like, is there some sort of an entity that goes by this name? Is there like some sort of a history with this place we're living? She can't find anything definitive. She still has no idea what it means, but eventually it stops, and she has not had, thank God, sleep paralysis in years, but it's something. She said that this was just such a vivid thing for her that if she had to, she could sit down right now and draw this woman in like perfect detail without missing a beat, because it is like burned into her brain how terrifying her appearance was. And that's pretty much where the story ends. But guys, that last part, I have got to say this. When you get like story submissions like this of people's, true stories, you do see consistencies. And there are a few entities in particular, like the Hat Man, or this thing that people see in the Appalachians that they say stands on two legs like a man, but it looks like a deer, and it has like antlers and no face, and it's like skin is pulled too tight across its face, and it looks kind of skeletal, whatever this thing is. And then this woman with sharp teeth is another one. There's a few different ones, but like there was a story I got last year. I think I may have even named it, the title of it, The Woman with Sharp Teeth. And for my TikTokers, I'll try to find that story and link it in a comment here. Just click the comment if I find it. But I remember that this lady said in her childhood home that she and her siblings exclusively at night would see this woman with sharp teeth under their kitchen table, and they're fully awake, like walking through their house, and they repetitively saw this. Freaking traumatized them. Now, if I'm remembering correctly, they grow up and one of them or both of them have kids of their own, and their mom still lives in that childhood home, so they would take their kids over to like see their grandma, and their kids started reporting seeing the woman with sharp teeth. They had never been told about her. They had no idea their parents saw this in that house under the kitchen table growing up, and like the kids are seeing it now too. You know, it came full circle, and it's just like the thought of it is freaking horrifying to me. And it's like that across the board with these other entities. It's a freaking thing. Y'all can't convince me it's not. It's just, I don't know. Y'all let me know what you think in the comments. Stay tuned for more spooky stories, and if you all have any idea or theories on what this sharp teeth lady is, let me know, because the amount of DMs that I get about that is just, it makes it a little more compelling, you know?
In Australia, there is something more terrifying than snakes and spiders. Now, in Queensland, there was this story from this older gentleman who lived alone in the bush. Now, every night he would sit on his porch. And on his house, he had this bright spotlight. And so one night he was sitting out on the porch and he was just enjoying the weather, when all of a sudden that spotlight on the side of the house goes out. So he thinks, okay, the bulb must have burned out. I'll go inside and replace it. So after he goes inside and he grabs a bulb and he goes around, he gets his ladder and he goes up there to change out the bulb. But when he gets up there, he notices something has taken the bulb out. And so he's like, you know, what could have happened to the light bulb? Like, did someone steal it? And right at that moment, he starts hearing the sound of two rocks clinking together. They got a little louder, and out of the corner of his eye, he sees this tall, shadowy figure run by. So he gets down off the ladder and he runs inside, locks the door, and he immediately phones the police. Now, he lives so far out in the bush that the police cannot get there until the morning. So as he's waiting for the police to come, he keeps looking out the window. And from time to time, he would see this tall, shadowy figure sort of run by. And he would think that he saw these bright, glowing eyes that almost look like two flames. And so eventually the morning comes and the police arrive. And when he goes to the door and answers it, he said it was this Aboriginal fella. And the officer begins talking to him, and he explains to him, something stole the light out of my spotlight, and I began seeing these shadowy figures, and I could hear the sound of two rocks clinking together. And this officer just gives him this very serious look. And he says, you know, that's weird, because my people, we have this story of something we call a malinge. And he said, well, what's that? Said, well, you know, he's this tall fella that has very hard skin, almost like a rock. And he walks sort of very awkward. And it said his knees slapped together. And he doesn't like any sort of light. And most of the time, he'll, you know, avoid you. But if you make him angry, it could be very bad. He said, you know, that's just a legend. You know, we make up to scare the young kids. And so after the officer left, he just couldn't help but think, like, you know, did I make this thing mad by having that spotlight up? So that night, it started to get dark, and he went back out on his porch. And as he sat there, looking out off into the distance, he began to hear the sound of rocks clinking together. Clink, 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 clink. And he began to see this very tall, shadowy figure standing there with these bright, glowing eyes that look like fire. And So he instantly turned around, ran inside his house, and locked the door. But this thing didn't go away. It came up to the door and it started shaking the handle. So as he's sitting there by the door, hoping this thing doesn't come inside, it moves over to the window and it breaks out the window and it tries to come inside his house. So he goes out the back door and he runs around to his Jeep and he jumps in and he turns on the lights and he starts up the vehicle. And instantly, when the lights hit this thing, it took off running back into the bush and he managed to drive out of there. So what do you think? Is the Malinge real? An Appalachian skinwalker is much different than the Navajo skinwalker. Okay, the first difference is that a Navajo skinwalker, right, is conjured up by a medicine man, whereas an Appalachian skinwalker is conjured up by a witch in the Appalachia who uses black magic. The other big difference between the Appalachian skinwalker versus the native skinwalker is that the Appalachian skinwalker tends to take the form of objects, and a lot of time almost just comes as an invisible force that calls out to people or follows them. Or, for instance, the Bell Witch, right? It wasn't a witch going after that family. It was a skinwalker that was conjured up to harm and, terrify that family. So I got a story for you. This is a true story now, and I'm going to show you a picture as well. So there's a man named Donald. Donald was an avid hunter and trapper. He lived near the North Carolina-Tennessee border up in the Appalachian Mountains. And one day, he's out hunting and he's in the middle of the woods and he set up, in this deer stand. And he'd been out there all day, and he's, had been hunting for the whole week. So he was getting tired. He falls asleep and dozes off. Well, when he awakes, it's now nighttime and it's gotten dark. And as he's adjusting some things in his tree stand, all of a sudden, whoosh, he hears this loud thing move over the top of him through the trees, like it's some kind of large bird or something. And he thinks it's odd because, he hasn't seen, birds that big in that area. But then once again, whoosh, right? This big thing just passes over the top of him through the trees and it's shaking all the branches. And then again, a third time. So, he gets down off his tree stand and is like, okay, it's time to head back to camp. As he starts, walking this trail back to camp, all of a sudden he hears something, say, Donald, Donald, hey, Donald, come play, and this voice just keeps calling to him. And he, it's like freaking out. He's terrified. So he takes off running and he's running as fast as he can. And all of a sudden, boom, he trips and he rolls. And he realizes he just tripped over this root that is sticking out of the ground. And when he looks up, he notices this big, eerie-looking tree. And, it has no leaves on it, but it has branches that almost look like hands, and it looks like it has a face. And this tree starts staring at him and opens its eyes, and he can see that this tree has taken some kind of physical, humanly form. And it starts reaching its branches down, and it grabs Donald, and it picks him up, and is shaking him and whipping him with the other branches. Well, Donald still manages to hold on to his rifle, and he just starts firing at the tree. And he manages to hit one of the branches that was holding his leg, and it basically breaks, and he falls to the ground. So he runs back to his cabin, and he gets inside, and he locks all the doors. And all night long, he can hear the tree lashing at the house, trying to get in. And the next morning, all is calm. But he notices outside, there's the tree. It has moved. It's next to the cabin. And he manages to take some pictures, which actually show the face in the tree. And this is the picture that Donald took. In Australia, there is something more terrifying than snakes and spiders. Now, in Queensland, there was this story from this older gentleman who lived alone in the bush. Now, every night he would sit on his porch. And on his house, he had this bright spotlight. And so one night he was sitting out on the porch and he was just enjoying the weather, when all of a sudden that spotlight on the side of the house goes out. So he thinks, okay, the bulb must have burned out. I'll go inside and replace it. So after he goes inside and he grabs a bulb and he goes around, he gets his ladder and he goes up there to change out the bulb. But when he gets up there, he notices something has taken the bulb out. And so he's like, what what could have happened to the light bulb? Like, did someone steal it? And right at that moment, he starts hearing the sound of two rocks clinking together. It got a little louder, and out of the corner of his eye, he sees this tall, shadowy figure run by. So he gets down off the ladder and he runs inside, locks the door, and he immediately phones the police. Now, he lives so far out in the bush that the police cannot get there until the morning. So as he's waiting for the police to come, he keeps looking out the window. And from time to time, he would see this tall, shadowy figure sort of run by. And he would think that he saw these bright, glowing eyes that almost look like two flames. And so eventually the morning comes and the police arrive. And when he goes to the door and answers it, he said it was this Aboriginal fella. And the officer begins talking to him, and he explains to him, something stole the light out of my spotlight, and I began seeing these shadowy figures, and I could hear the sound of two rocks clinking together. And this officer just gives him this very, like, serious look. And he says, you know, that's weird, because my people, we have this story of something we call a malinge. And he said, well, what's that? He said, well, you know, he's this tall fella that has very hard skin, almost like a rock. And he walks sort of very awkward. And it said his knees slap together. And he doesn't like any sort of light. And most of the time, he'll, you know, avoid you. But if you make him angry, it could be very bad. But he said, you know, that's just a legend. You know, we make up to scare the young kids. And so after the officer left, he just couldn't help but think, like, you know, did I make this thing mad by having that spotlight up? So that night, it started to get dark, and he went back out on his porch. And as he sat there, looking out off into the distance, he began to hear the sound of rocks clinking together. Clink, 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 clink. And he began to see this very tall, shadowy figure standing there with these bright, glowing eyes that look like fire. And so he instantly turned around, ran inside his house, and locked the door. But this thing didn't go away. It came up to the door, and it started shaking the handle. So as he's sitting there by the door, hoping this thing doesn't come inside, it moves over to the window. And it breaks out the window, and it tries to come inside his house. So he goes out the back door, and he runs around to his Jeep. And he jumps in, and he turns on the lights, and he starts up the vehicle. And instantly, when the lights hit this thing, it took off running back into the bush. And he managed to drive out of there. So what do you think? Is the malinge real?
I just want to say that I don't think you need to be in recovery to understand that when you do substances, you lift the veil. Sometimes I think some of them are a doorway or a portal to a whole nother realm. This story actually takes place when I was in rehab years ago when I was getting clean, and this story still gives me chills on the back of my neck till this day, especially since one of the counselors was really cool and she kind of did something illegal to help me out with this, and I'm going to explain. This story actually takes place in a rehab center in Pennsylvania, right in the Appalachian Mountains. Now, if you're in recovery, you know for a fact that detox can be a rough place. Well, I remember that I had just gotten out of detox, okay, and my room was up on the 3rd floor of this treatment center. This was one of those days where I was just kind of depressed, just walking around and, you know, didn't really know what I was doing, and next thing you know, I heard what sounded like bare feet on like a tile floor. Like, you know that sound when someone walks with bare feet and like their feet stick to the floor? So I turn around and I see this girl that she's got like blonde hair, kind of lighter than mine, same shoulder length, and she is in detox scrubs. Mind you, this girl is literally walking like this, like, you know, and I'm thinking, oh my God, she must have just got here. She must have gotten lost and she's on the wrong floor. I look at her and I say, hey, are you okay? Are you lost? Because detox is on the 1st floor, honey. This girl literally goes like this. She goes and stumbly turns around and starts walking back in the opposite direction. It's kind of weird that she didn't answer me, but at the same time, I'm like, she's probably really high. So I just start walking behind her, and she's about 100 feet from me all the way on the other side of the hallway. I'm literally going, hey, are you okay? Do you need help? And as I say that, she cuts the corner where the elevator is. So I start running because I wanted to catch up to her because I thought she was just messed up and lost. And I cut that corner literally not even 3 seconds after she did. I didn't hear an elevator open or nothing, and she was gone. Y'all know when an elevator opens, you hear ding, ding, ding. So at that point, I was like, yo, okay, that's kind of weird. I'm sitting in group therapy later that day, and I bring that up to the counselor. Everybody's kind of just staring at me like, yeah, that's kind of weird. This girl probably got lost. And the counselor looks at me and goes, Sparrow, what did she look like? Told her exactly what she looked like, and the counselor just stared at me with her eyes like, and then she pulls out a book, and she starts flipping through the pages, and she points at this picture, and she says, this girl right here. I look at her and I'm like, yeah, like who is that? She looks around the room before she looks back at me, and she was like, Sparrow, that girl died here last week in detox. She overdosed. The whole room was dead silent. All got chills down our spines, and I couldn't believe it because, first of all, that counselor broke HIPAA laws to be able to tell me that. But that was the creepiest freaking thing ever, and I still think about it till this day. If any of y'all have any creepy stories like that when you were in treatment or just in general, put it down in the comments, y'all. I would love to hear it. Follow for more crazy stories in my life.
Have you heard of the fake house theory? So there's these people who believe that the cities and towns that we live in are not as big as we actually think, and that within these cities and towns there are these fake houses and fake businesses that are sort of put there as props. And you know, as I started to think about it more, I live in a town, 10,000 people. But in the past 7 years that I've been here, I've probably only encountered a couple hundred people. And when I've lived in other cities, right, the amount of people that I've seen has been very limited, very small. So are our cities and towns actually much smaller? Like, are there all these empty houses that are just essentially props and businesses that don't exist, and basically we are living in one big lie? Now, it's easy to get under the illusion of the actual size of a town or city, because when you think about it, if you go to a stadium, right, when you see that stadium packed, it looks like there's 1 million people there. But they can only hold up to like 60, 80,000. But to you, it appears like that's millions and millions of people. And so it would be easy to be deceived and think, oh, this town has millions of people, or, you know, the city has millions of people, but I only see so many people all the time. So what do you think? Are we living in cities and towns that are fake?
My grandma took me to a place I'd never seen before after she died. Lipstick on so I can run this mouth. Now focus. Scary story time. Fright Night Files. Becca lives right outside of Nashville, and her grandmother, who she called Meemaw, which is adorable, passed away, unfortunately, in 2022. She was in a nursing home. She had been sick for about 8 months. They would go and visit her all of the time. And unfortunately, it kind of got a little weird because about a month before Meemaw passed away, she kept asking the nurse and Becca to open the window. Now, she was in a room that didn't have any windows, which I just want to say that's kind of sad. But anyway, so she was in a room that didn't have any windows, not judging, just saying that's sad. And she kept asking like, hey, I need you to open the window. Someone open the window. And I know what you're thinking. You're probably thinking like, okay, so that she could get out or whatever. Maybe, right? So months go by. Becca is at home. She's asleep. She has a dream, and her Meemaw shows up. She's in this kitchen, and she knows that it's not like a regular dream because she was aware that Meemaw shouldn't have been there. I've had a dream like that before, and it's interesting to say the least. But anyway, she's in this kitchen. The kitchen had like yellow and white tile. It had this cute little cat clock on the wall like you've seen on TV. All of the things that were suitable for what Meemaw would have liked, but nowhere that Becca had ever been before. She walks up to Meemaw, and Meemaw turns around and tells her like, hey, have a seat at the table. I've got something for you. And it's an apple pie. She places it in front of her, and she asks her like, what are you doing here? Like, where are we? Like, what's going on? And she messing around like in the sink, washing dishes and stuff. And she just turns around and she's like, oh, well, I finally got the window open, right? That's the end of the dream. She wakes up, she's upset. She goes and tells her mom, like, hey, I just had this dream. And her mom starts crying. She tells her that the Meemaw had passed away in the middle of the night, which, okay, that is sad. But she started crying because Meemaw's like first home that she lived in before, you know, she even had kids of her own. That's what the kitchen looked like. She had photos of it. She goes and gets them out of a drawer. She's like, did it look like this? And it was like a black and white photo, but she said the kitchen was the same, and she told her, like, well, this was yellow and white, and she's like, yeah, that's what it used to look like, really cute, all the things. And Mima loved to bake apple pie, but yeah, she tells her, I got the window open. So okay, was she like saying that that's the way that she was going to get out, or she finally found a room with a window? What's up with the window? And have any of you ever had dreams from a loved one talking about opening a window?
Are mimics using AI? Now, when you think about a mimic, what do? They copy people. They pretend to be your mother, your father, your sister, your brother, right? And often they're found in your home, pretending to be a loved one, trying to lure you in. And think about AI, right? What does it do? It impersonates someone's voice, their likeness. It pretends to be someone else. They are eerily similar. Now, there have been several reports of people having encounters with these mimic-like creatures using AI technology. Now, there's this man named Cal from Nashville, and he said a couple months ago, he was home on break from college, and he was staying with his mother. And so this particular day, he's sitting in the living room, and he has this nice long conversation with his mom. Then he proceeds to go upstairs into his bedroom. After about 20 minutes, his phone starts to ring. It's his mom. So he picks it up, and he hears his mom's voice saying, it's me, it's your mom, I'm your mother. It's me, I'm your mom, it's your mother. And he's like, what are you talking about? Like, why didn't you just come upstairs? Why are you calling me on the phone? And it just kept saying, like, it's me, it's your mom, it's your mother, you're my son, I'm your mother. And he's like, what are you talking about? So then he walks downstairs into the living room, and there's his mom sitting on the couch, but she doesn't have her phone. So he's like, Mom, like, what's going on? And she's like, what do you mean? And he goes, you're on the phone right now. And she goes, no, I'm not. I'm sitting here on the couch. My phone's over there on the table. And he sees her phone. So he's like, who is this? Like, who is this? And it's like, it's me. It's your mom. I'm your mother. He's like, no, you're not my mom. My mom is in front of me. Like, this is someone messing with me. And it just kept saying, it's me. It's your mom. So he hangs up. But what was weird is that the phone call came from his mom. And when he goes and he looks at her phone, he doesn't see like a call log. And that just kind of creeped him out, because he's like, how in the world could someone prank me using my mom's phone? So a couple months goes by and he kind of forgets about this. And one day he gets a text from his mom, and like he starts talking to her. And then later in the night, all of a sudden he gets like a pinpoint on like a GPS on Google Maps. And his mom said, started to sound like very much like Chat GPT. And he said she would like respond almost like he was talking to a computer. And he goes, why did you send me this location? And she says, my car is broke down. Like, come and get me. So he's like worried about his mother. And he's like, oh, she's broke down. I better go help her. So he gets in his car and he starts driving out to this location where he discovers it's like way outside of town in the middle of the woods, which he thinks is weird. Like, what is my mother doing out here? Just then he decides to call his mom's phone. And when he does, his mom answers. And he's like, hey, Mom, like, what are you doing out in the woods? And she's like, what are you talking about? I'm at home. He's like, no, you've just been texting me. You told me to go out in the woods and pick you up because your car broke down. And she's like, no, I am at my house. He drives to his mother's house. And sure enough, she is there. And still to this day, he doesn't know who that was texting and calling from his mom's phone. So what do you think? Are mimics now using AI technology?
My grandma told me to never answer the second knock, and I didn't understand why until that night. When I was younger, I used to stay with my grandma all the time. She stayed in a place that was out in the country. No neighbors close by. It was just like a really long dirt driveway and trees. And I remember she used to tell me every single night before bed, she would say, never answer the knocking at night. I always just thought she was being paranoid. She didn't want me to answer the door to any strangers. So one night when I was visiting, my grandma went to bed early. I'm up by myself in the living room. It's completely quiet. And then I hear one knock at the door. It was around midnight. It was a very soft knock. I froze for a minute. I wasn't really scared. And so I got up and I went to go walk towards the door. And then I remembered what my grandma said, and I just kind of stopped. And I just listened for a minute. I didn't hear anything. The knocking stopped. There was no sound of footsteps. There was no noise outside, basically. So I went back and I sat on the couch and I Waited there for a minute, and then probably about 10 minutes later, I heard a second knock. And this time I'm a little annoyed because I'm thinking that somebody's just messing with us. So I get up again and I walk towards the door. I put my hand on the handle and I hear "don't." And I look behind me and my grandma, she's standing there in the hallway and she looks scared. She walks over and she grabs me and quietly pulls me back and she says, "Wait for the third one." So we're both just standing there really quietly. And there it was, a third knock, but this knock was different. This knock was louder. It was more aggressive, and it was coming from the back door this time. But at the same exact time, you hear something shifting from the front porch. It was like something was circling the house, trying to get in, and my grandma grabs my arm tightly, and she says, "That's why we don't answer the first knock." We didn't sleep the rest of that night. We kind of just stayed up talking to each other. And the next morning came, and we went outside and we checked, and there were footprints in the dirt. And they circled from the front door to the back door and also to the windows, like something was really trying to get into the house that night.
You've heard about the movie Pirates of the Caribbean, but did you know that Captain Blackbeard hid treasures in Tobago and looted a ship in Trinidad? We are back with another Trini Paranormal, Trini Scary Story, Trini Folklore for you today, and I have a random piece of history for you all. And it's that Pirates of the Caribbean was a real thing. And the most famous pirate of its time, Captain Blackbeard, attacked a ship off of the harbor of Port of Spain. So a little story on Captain Blackbeard. He is known as one of the most famous and the most feared pirates in the golden age of piracy, which would have been around the 1600s to the 1700s. He was an English pirate, and he was known for his long black beard that he would often plait and put ribbons on. And usually when he went and he won battles, he would put fuses, which was like hemp matches, into his beard and into his hair and light it, and it's usually very slow burning and it would be smoked out, and he looked very evil in appearance. He was known to be a very successful pirate and a very ruthless one at that, and was feared amongst the people of the Caribbean. Now in 1716, Captain Blackbeard, he did not capture the Queen's Anne Revenge as yet. He was actually a lieutenant in the pirate Benjamin Hornigold's ship, and they floated into the Gulf of Paria. No fear. And at that time, the Spanish economy here was weak. We didn't have much going on, and our defense was basically defenseless. Our garrison was basically a wooden wall, a muddy wall with 2 guns. So Lieutenant Blackbeard at the time sailed the ship into the Gulf of Paria, the harbor of Port of Spain, and decided to loot a Spanish merchant ship. What he did was take all of the cocoa from that ship that was set to be out to go to Europe. Mind you, cocoa at the time was worth its weight in silver. When he finished looted the ship, and mind you, again, the garrison only had 2 guns behind a mud wall, couldn't do anything. So Trinidadians at that time stood there defenseless, as Captain Blackbeard would have just swooped in, did minimal damage, minimal violence, looted the entire ship of all its cocoa, and in a fit of psychological warfare, burnt the entire ship down. Despite staying in the harbor of Port of Spain for a few days as they looted and burned down the ship, Blackbeard was known for being particularly violent and creating a lot of bloodshed. Surprisingly, he did not. Burning down the ship and looting the ship seemed to have sufficed him, so there was not much bloodshed, little to no bloodshed as a matter of fact. And they looted and they went on their way. So let me know, do you all want to know about more pirate stories, Pirate of the Caribbean stories in Tobago? Because Tobago was known to be the cove where they hid pirate treasures, and pirate treasures were found in Tobago. Let me know.
I need to tell you guys this ghost story. This story was sent into my email, and if you have any ghost stories, paranormal encounters, or scary stories that you want to share, you can send them to the email in my bio. Something in my house learned how to sound exactly like my mother. My story starts in a picture-perfect family home. It really was the epitome of picturesque. Our house was in a beautiful neighborhood, on a quiet street, perfectly trimmed lawns, large shady trees, and a friendly dog bark or two to break up the children's happy laughter. It was the kind of environment any parent dreams of raising their children in. Nothing about this unassuming house, in this unassuming neighborhood, would have made you think haunted, or ghosts, or anything under the umbrella of that nature. And at first, I wouldn't have thought so either. But after living there for only 2 years, I couldn't be so sure anymore. It started just as any other normal evening would have gone. I was in my room, probably playing with my toys or reading a book, when I heard my mother call for me. Her calling my name wouldn't have raised any flags for me, but her tone kind of did. I remember it being sharp and thinking back quickly to remember if I had done anything to be in trouble for. But nonetheless, I thought better of it than to keep her waiting, so I answered her. And when she didn't say anything, I got up from what I was doing, and I stepped into the hallway and looked into the kitchen, from where the call had come from, expecting to see her there, maybe with her hands on her hips like she'd do when she was angry, but she wasn't there. In fact, no one was. It was empty, completely still and quiet. While my mind fought to process and catch up to what was happening and provide me with a logical explanation, I heard her voice again, calling out for me just as she had the first time, but this time her call came from the basement, and her tone had changed. This one was soft and sweet. "Honey, come down to the basement." Immediately, the soft and sweet tone in my ears turned to suspicion, because my mother didn't call me honey ever. She had a nickname for me that she always used for as long as I can remember, and she almost never called me anything else. One thing's for sure, it wasn't honey. And I remember in that moment thinking about how strange that was, but I was 10, and when your mother calls you, you answer. So I walked to the basement door, turned the knob, looked down, and started down those steep steps. Even now, I can remember how cold it felt down there. A basement in any home will feel weird, stuffy and heavy, like the walls are closing in on you from the sides, and the weight of the home is crushing you from above. Nothing ever feels the same in the basement. Even the sound doesn't move around the same. I walked around the length of the area. I checked the guest room, the bathroom, the storage area. Nothing. No footsteps, no sound, no mom. There was only one other place left for me to check. The back utility room. The pitch-black room that held water heaters and pipes, cobwebs, and was almost guaranteed to be haunted by a ghost or two. And my parents had only one strict rule about the utility room. Do not go in there. I stood outside the door, knowing that it was the only room left for me to check for my mom. But I had this feeling, like if I opened it, something would be waiting for me, and it wouldn't be her. So I decided against it. I'll tell her that I couldn't find her, that I went down there and didn't see her, and I followed her rule of not checking the creepy utility room, and so really I couldn't get into trouble for that. And as I turned to leave, the doorknob moved. Slowly, one way and then to the next, as if something on the other side were testing it. I froze, my eyes glued to it. And then I heard breathing. And if I hadn't been holding my own breath, I would have thought that it was mine, but this was heavy and wet. And then a voice. But it wasn't my mother anymore. And it seemed to come from every angle and all at once, and it was loud and it growled, "I said, come downstairs." I can still hear it. This voice wasn't human. It was one voice, but several all at once. Impossible for one person to imitate, and it was angry and deep. I ran. I ran so fast that I don't even remember my feet touching the stairs in order to propel me up, but I basically flew up to my parents' room, ripped open the door, And there she was, my mom, sitting calmly on her bed, watching a movie, completely oblivious to what I had just experienced. She looked at me, startled, and asked what was wrong, and I found myself not being able to explain it. Because how do you tell someone, especially your mother, that something was just pretending to be her, and whatever it was, tried to lure me into the dark? About a week later, it got worse. It was around midnight, and I was almost asleep, and I heard my dad's voice from my parents' room across the hall. I heard him call my name, and then he said, "Go to sleep," which confused me because although I wasn't asleep, I'd been in my bed for hours, and so there was no reason for him to know or even think that I was still awake. I got up quietly and cracked my door open to see if anything was wrong, and that's when I saw him, sitting straight up in bed, completely rigid. And he was staring at the foot of the bed, tracking something with his eyes like something was moving across the room. And then I heard him say it again, calm this time, but obviously uneasy. "Hey, I told you to go to sleep now." He was talking to me, but he wasn't looking at me. He was looking at something else. Something walking toward the doorway, toward my room. And then our eyes met. And I will never forget the look on his face. Terror. Not confusion, not annoyance, pure fear. He jumped out of bed, ran to me, grabbed me, dragged me into their room, and woke up my mom. And through his shaking, proceeded to tell us what he'd just seen. He had woken up to a little girl standing at the edge of his bed, silent and staring. She had long brown hair and was wearing a white nightgown. For a second, he thought he was dreaming until she started moving, walking slowly toward the door, toward me and my bedroom. And as she reached the doorway, he saw the real me standing there. He chanced a glance back at what was just there, but she had vanished. Gone. But what never left after that night was the uneasiness that had now settled itself over the home and our lives.
My boyfriend came back home from work and he was acting very strange. Within a few minutes, I received a phone call from my boyfriend. So who the hell was that in the house with me? Story time. I live with my boyfriend and he works odd hours. Sometimes he's very tired because of the nature of his job. So on this occasion, I was in the kitchen cooking when I heard the front door. So I shouted his name and I said, "Go get a shower, come back, food will be ready." I hear nothing. I ask again, "Did you hear me?" I hear nothing. I ask, "Are you tired?" And I hear a strange voice saying yes. I didn't think nothing of it until he said in a very strange voice that, "Make sure you lock the back door." I thought he was just tired because sometimes when he's tired, he acts and does weird things. So I ignored it. But tell me why my phone rang. My heart skipped a beat. I mean, cold chills run down my spine because it is my boyfriend ringing me. So I stood still when I answered the call and I could not even bring myself to talk. I could hear him asking, "Are you there? Are you there?" I turned and looked, and my boyfriend is there in the kitchen with this grin, unusual grin on his face. He started to walk towards me. At this point, I'm frozen. I'm panicking. I don't even know what to say or what to do. So I was able to actually tell my actual boyfriend on the phone that someone is in the house and that person looks exactly like him. So he knew this wasn't a joke. So he had to rush back home. But tell me why, when my boyfriend, the one in the house with me, walking towards me, all of a sudden diverted to go upstairs. We have a mirror next to the staircase. I kid you not, when he walked past, yes, his being is my boyfriend, but the reflection on the mirror is not my boyfriend. I quickly bolted out of the house. I just went to a friend's house. My boyfriend got back. He didn't even come to my friend's house. He went straight to the house. He searched everywhere and he did not see anything in the house. We went back there. But the strange thing is that my boyfriend that came back home asked me, "Did you lock the back door?" But soon after that, the front door opened. So who the hell was that in my house?
This right here is one of the reasons why I could never work as a security guard, especially at night. It all started with this footage right here where you can see a woman walking alone very late at night. Now it looked like she was trespassing a private property, an area where she shouldn't be. As you can see, she was dressed in full white, her hair was covering everything, so you can't really see her face, and she was barefoot. Right, based off the appearance only, this thing already seems weird, but I'm not judging, you are. What I wanted to talk about here is how she was walking. That girl was taking 5 steps at a time. She was walking really fast, like bro, calm down. Even was seen taking a turn to the right, and this is where things got even worse. Because at one point, precisely in this moment right here, she basically disappeared. Like yes, you could no longer see her through the cameras. You simply cannot see her in the footage anymore, it's impossible. But what you can see is a shadow that follows her the moment she disappears. Please tell me I'm not the only one who saw that silhouette running, but the way she disappeared is crazy. It reminds me of someone who drops a video and then disappears for 4 days. Nah, but for real, this time I will post daily, so stay tuned.
Let's take a look at a few more of the horrifying pictures that you guys have sent me. This photo was taken by me back in 2018 here in the Philippines. What you are about to hear is a...
We listen, we don't get scared, and we don't judge. Let me give you guys a story time of when this boy died while praying in the mountains with a pastor, and he hid the truth for a couple of weeks, and they also didn't know where he was whilst this pastor hid the truth. This story I was told by my grandmother, and she says it happened during the time whereby it was apartheid, around the 1950s, 60s there. So my grandmother is like, when the colonizers came to South Africa, they obviously taught them about their gods. They taught them about God and Jesus Christ and all of that. So then I think there was a pastor who they used to get to like the black people. Like the white people used the specific black pastor to get to the black people because they saw that this pastor was being trusted by people. Right? The people in that area trust him, so they were like, listen, we need you to push this narrative onto these people. So eventually, bit by bit, the families of this community started believing this guy, and even my grandmother's mother. So my grandmother is like, there was this boy who she was friends with, and she says that her and this boy would go together every Friday to go pray in the mountains with this pastor. So with all this believing in God and all of that, they had to go and pray in the mountains because that's what Jesus did, right? Where he prayed to God, I think for 40 days and 40 nights. And then they obviously do the same, but they just do it for one day, whereby on Friday after school, they go to this particular mountain and then they pray and sing and worship until the following day before the sun rises, and then they go back home. Every single week, by the way. So my grandmother is like, this particular Friday she could not go. For some reason she's like, it felt off, and then she eventually changed her mind because the boy that she says she was friends with came to come fetch her or whatever, and was like, let's go. And my grandmother was like, she started feeling sick on the way there. Like she needed to go to the toilet. She had like really bad diarrhea, so she had to go back. She had to keep running back to the toilet. The boy is like, you know what, like you're actually sick, you know, it's okay, stay, I'll come and update you on what we learned on that particular day. So my grandmother's like, okay. Baby boy goes to the mountain with the pastor and other people, and unfortunately that day it rained heavily. You know what I mean? These people did not have TVs, I think, and they also didn't have phones to tell them when it's gonna rain and all of that. They looked at the sun, I think, and my grandmother was like, we looked at the sky, and that's how we assumed it was gonna rain or something. I don't know, man, I don't know. So it rained or whatever, and then the following day, she's thinking she's gonna see her friend, right? And her friend has not come to check up on her and tell her like what they had learned. Like, you know, she's like, and time is moving, do you understand? 12, 1, 2, 3. She's like, this boy's still not coming to my house, because she assumed that he didn't come in the morning because he went to sleep. But you know, something felt off again. So my grandmother is like, hey, okay, let me just go look for him. So she leaves her house and to go to this boy's home. And she says, as she's walking to this boy's house, she bumps into the mom. And she asks the mom, and she's like, hi, mama, like, I'm looking for so-and-so. He didn't come to my house and he said he's gonna come. So, like, is he at home before I waste my time going there and he's not there? And the mom is like, as a matter of fact, I was coming to your house to ask you if you haven't seen so-and-so because he did not come back home this morning. And she's like, the people, not the people of the church, but she met this one boy who was the pastor's help, and she asked him, where is he? They say he left and they don't know where he went. So she's like, the mom is like, I'm thinking he went to your house. And my grandmother's like, nope, he didn't come here. So my grandmother and the boy's mom go to the church and they confront the pastor, like, my guy, like, this boy did not come home. Like, what do you guys mean he left but he did not come home? Where is he? Because I left him in your care. The pastor, guys, was like, no. Oh, before they met the pastor, there was this lady that told them that told so-and-so's mom that your boy fell ill yesterday as we were praying. And then when we left to come to the church, right? Because before they go to their houses, they start at the church first. She's like, we left the pastor and he was praying for the boy there. And then as he was praying for the boy, we all left and we left the pastor there. So the boy's mom goes to the pastor and is like, where is my child? The pastor's like, he starts by saying we all came back together and then he went on his way. And then the mom is like, no, but the people are saying this is what happened. And he's like, oh yeah, he did, but I prayed for him. You know, God is a God of miracles and he saved him and then he went back home. The story just kept on changing. And a couple of days go by and the pastor's still saying the same story. And then people started to protest against this pastor to like bring the boy back home, whatever. And unfortunately for them, because the colonizers were the ones that told him to push this message onto these people and they were paying him, I think, they were protecting him from these people. So y'all are protesting with your hands, trying to get justice, trying to find your son, or trying to find this boy who was part of the community, and these people have guns. And mind you, when these people were obviously praising God and Jesus, they obviously abandoned their traditional ways and they never really went to traditional healers and all of that. And then my grandmother's aunt heard the story and then she went with my grandmother to this boy's house and she told the lady, like the mom, she was like, hey, like, did you forget about the traditional healers? Did you forget about the traditionals? No, you did not forget about them. She's like, listen, at 5 a.m. tomorrow, you better be up. We are I'm taking you somewhere. And then obviously the mom was like, no, God this, God that. And they was like, hey, God can wait. He can wait. We still praise him, we still love him so dear much, but we're going. And the boy's entire family convinced her, because you know how people that believe in Jesus Christ sometimes behave in certain situations. And the whole family convinced her and she was like, yeah, let's go. They got to the traditional healer and the traditional healer apparently wasted no time. He was like, listen, give me the man's photo. I will deal with him until he tells the truth. I will make sure that he feels like he's getting stung by bees. He will feel like his ass is on fire. He will see this boy until he tells the truth, because the traditional healer did tell them that the boy is not alive anymore. Sad. Mind you, this was like a couple of weeks later. The mom was starting to even give up because they went to the forest to search for him. Where they went to go pray, they did not find him. Obviously, those things happened to him. He started to go crazy. He started to say the boy's name in front of people. It was just crazy. Unfortunately, the colonizers, guys, came and captured this man because they did not want anything that will make the black people think that the God is a bad person or Jesus is bad, or or people that preach the word are bad people. So they captured him and they put him in a mental asylum, and it stayed quiet, guys. And then I think a week or two later, the boy that I told you guys helps the pastor from time to time came and told the family the truth. And he was like, they were threatening him. They said if he tells the truth, they're going to put him in a mental asylum, or they're going to say that he did it, but he didn't do anything. Now that the pastor's gone, he tells the family, please don't tell them that I was the one that told you guys. Just act like you guys were going on a search and you were looking for this boy, and this is how you found him. Apparently it rained, and the boy suffered from like the cold. Like he could not handle the cold, right? And so he passed out. Instead of them like putting a blanket over him, taking him back home, they did not do that. They started praying for him while it kept on raining on him. Eventually, the boy is like this. The boy who's telling the truth now is like he cramped up like this, and like the boy is like I could tell that this person is no longer alive. But the pastor refused to accept it, and so he acted like he kept on praying. When the people left, they said that the pastor went at a certain tree and dug up a grave and left that and put the boy's body inside there and closed it up, and he was like, listen, this is where you guys need to search, you will find the boy. And they called the community together and they went to go search, and they found the boy buried. The mom was crying and my grandmother was crying, but my grandmother said it was more so of a relief that at least we found his body. He wasn't buried at a random tree, to be found by people like years later with his bones, with no identity, nothing. And they were just going to take those bones and do research on them. And as for the pastor, they don't know what happened to the pastor, because after that, he never came back home. I don't know how many years later, and he still has not returned. They don't know what happened to him. They know he probably died at some point, but they just don't know like where he was buried. And I think that's fair, because that's what the pastor wanted to happen to the boy, and that happened to him. See, karma is real. And that's for them using God's name in vain. Do you understand? That's what happens when you sell out your own people, because you selling people out, eventually whatever you sold them out to will turn on you, if you get what I mean.
The Queen Mary holds the title for the most haunted ship in the world, and once you understand its history, there's no wonder why. Among a plethora of deaths like Walter Anderson in Haunted Room B340, and the explanation behind the sounds of crushing metal and men screaming because of a tragic collision during World War II, there's a lot more to get into. Another reported haunting on the ship was traced back to an 18-year-old named John Petter, who was fatally crushed by a watertight door during a routine safety drill. The drill was scheduled for 3:55 a.m. John, who had only been a crew member for a few months, attempted to slide through a door just as it was closing, but he didn't quite make it in time. He was found by a fellow crew member with his body still pinned between the door and the frame. This happened, of course, at door number 13, which is now considered another very haunted area of the Queen Mary. A few years after John died, a night watchman reported that he had been walking toward door 13 when his German Shepherd became frightened, like he had seen something that wasn't there, or that he at least couldn't see. The guard then heard a clanging metal sound moving toward him, which scared both him and his dog so much that they ran off. Over the years, others have also claimed to have been chased off from the area, as well as reports of a metallic sound, like the phantom noise of door number 13 being slammed shut. And one woman reportedly saw a man near door number 13, who she was later able to identify via old photographs as none other than John Petter. Another major paranormal hotspot on the Queen Mary is the first-class swimming pool. Not only can splashing be heard when nobody is in there, but wet footprints have also appeared out of nowhere, leading away from the pool, which is incredibly spooky when you consider that the pool was drained of water. The ghost of a young girl named Jackie is specifically known to hang out in this area. Some believe that Jackie may have drowned in the pool, although there's no documented proof of that. Even though it can't really be proven, children's laughter can still be heard echoing through the pool, and the photos are definitely hard to explain.
Come on, Mama!
There is something very off with the Great Wolf Lodge. The baby in that video began crying immediately after walking into the room at the Great Wolf Lodge, and people in the comments were saying that that little girl is not just feeling something off about this place, but she must be seeing something that they can't see. And this is all the more believable if you've heard that story about the family of 4 staying at the Great Wolf Lodge. The premise of the story is that these parents and their 2 children had booked 2 rooms, one for him and his wife with a queen bed in it, and then a bunk room for the
children that had an adjoining door, meaning that a door in the parents' room connected them to the room right next door with the bunk beds where the children would sleep. Well, they went off and enjoyed their day at the water park and came back to their rooms to sleep after a very eventful day. But around midnight, their 6-year-old son burst through the door to the parents' side of the room, crying and terrified. The dad thought that maybe he had just had a nightmare, but then the little boy said that he had seen something in his room. So the dad gets up to go check the exterior doors to both rooms to make sure he had locked them, and he had. So at this point, he just starts to think, okay, my little one's imagination must be running a little wild, and he let his son sleep in their bed with them for the rest of the night. But then at 3 a.m., the mom wakes up and is frantically looking around, which then wakes her husband up. When the husband asks her what's wrong, she says, "You didn't hear someone just scream, Mom?" The dad gets up out of bed again to go check on the other child, who is still in the adjoined room. But instead of being in bed, he finds her huddled up in the corner of the room, hyperventilating. And the daughter basically described seeing the same exact figure that her brother had seen. So at this point, the dad is now freaking out. He's running around, turning all of the lights on, checking under the beds, in the closets, looking for some sort of explanation for what now both of his children have seen. The mom is asking her daughter more questions about what she had seen, and she's giving her the details, saying that she was so scared that she crawled across the floor and hid in the corner of the room, trying to stay as quiet as humanly possible. But as the daughter is telling the story, the mom says, "If you were trying to stay as quiet as possible, why were you screaming out for me?" And the daughter says that she wasn't the one calling out for her mom. So they're all freaked out by this point. The dad decides that he's going to stay up until daylight just to keep an eye on everything while his family tries to get some rest. Well, once everyone had fallen back asleep, he starts to hear a loud banging noise coming from the other side of the adjoining door. Obviously, he's absolutely terrified, right? But he decides, you know what? I have to protect my family. So he gets up to go see what is banging on this door. And when he opens it up, he notices that the lights in the bunk room are still on, there's nobody inside, and his children are safe and sound with his wife in their bedroom. But then he starts to hear his wife panicking in her sleep, so he starts trying to wake her up. When she does wake up, she tells him that she was having a terrifying nightmare where she had woken up in the same exact bed in the same room they were in at that moment, but she had gotten out of the bed to use the bathroom. When she opened the door to leave the bathroom, she was suddenly stuck inside of the room with the bunk beds, and this evil entity was trying to get her. So in her dream, she runs over to the door that connects the bunk room to their bedroom and starts banging on it, hoping that her husband will open it to let her inside. She said she's banging on this door with all of her might, but then her husband woke her up. The family, understandably, packed all of their stuff the next morning and left, despite having a few more days of their vacation planned.
Might have known the story of real-life boogeyman.
Get ready with me while I tell you guys this ghost story. This story was sent into my email, and if you have any ghost stories, paranormal encounters, or scary stories that you want to share, you can send them to the email in my bio. At 9 years old, we heard something we couldn't see whisper our names. I was around 9 years old at the time, maybe even a little younger. My sister and I had been at a friend's apartment for the day, only about a 6-minute walk from our own flat. Our friend who we were visiting was moving away, and before we left, she gave us a scarf as a parting gift. I still remember it. It was a Polish football scarf, and I remember holding it tightly in my hands while we waited for the lift as we left. It should have been just an ordinary memory. A kid leaving a friend's house, a gift in my hands, my mom beside me, my sister talking, warm and comforting, and nothing that would point to the unusual. Eventually, the lift arrived, picked us up, and as we were headed down, the conversation shifted. And to this day, I hate thinking about what happened next. My mom had started telling us this old story about when she used to live in a house where a neighbor was obsessed with spirits. And apparently, this woman used to go around saying things like, "They're after me. The spirits are after me. They are all around us, and they're after you too." What do you mean? I think this would probably ruin my childhood. I think had I had a neighbor like this would have probably completely ruined my childhood. I remember in that moment thinking that the way that my mom was talking about this was just so casual, almost like she herself thought that it was a joke. Like what she was talking about was so impossible that she couldn't help but laugh. This entire conversation seemed to have piqued my sister's interest, because then she started asking questions. She started asking about ghosts and spirits, about what happens if they follow people around. And I remember thinking that she almost sounded like she was confused, but also like she was confessing in a way. And in that moment, I remember feeling this feeling of dread overtake me. It was out of nowhere, and it was the kind of fear that felt foreign to me as a child. It almost felt like it was too much, like no child ever should have to feel that amount of fear. In that moment, I turned to the both of them and I said, stop. Please stop talking about that. Something bad is going to happen. If I were talking about a certain topic, like ghosts or spirits or whatever, and a kid just turned around and it was like, that's enough. Like, you need to stop, something bad's gonna happen. 100% that I would listen to that child. I would listen to that child. A child's intuition, especially about ghosts and spirit and stuff. Oh, do not ever write off a child when they're telling you something weird is going on, because 9 times out of 10, something weird is going on. To this day, I can still hear my own voice in my head because I almost felt like it wasn't my own. Like it was different. Like what I was saying was my voice, but it also wasn't at the same time. They both turned to look at me and they both laughed, both completely dismissing me and what I had just said. Eventually, we got to our building, walked to our own lift, and pressed the button for our floor. And then we watched the doors shut in front of us as the lift started taking us up. Suddenly, the energy inside the lift changed. I noted that everything felt backwards almost. That strange hum from the elevator, the mechanical drone, the silence between people as you ride, all things that should feel completely normal felt bigger. The silence felt loud. And I know how that sounds, but unless you've experienced it, you just won't be able to fully grasp the weight of what was going on in that lift in that moment. Also, being in an elevator with that happening makes this entire thing so much worse. I mean, there's no escape. Like, there's nowhere for you to run unless the thing stops and it opens and it's open to a floor. I remember clutching to the scarf that my friend had given me in that moment, standing between my mom and my sister, breathing quick and shallow while noticing the tension could be cut with a knife. And then, from the small space between me and my sister, someone whispered my name. Clear, close, and confident, right beside my ear. Oh, I hate this. My full name spoken in a voice that very clearly did not belong to either my sister or my mom. In that moment, I froze. My sister whipped around to look at me at the exact same moment that I turned to look at her. And that's when we both must have realized just what the other was thinking, because our faces went white and we both started screaming at the same time, because we both realized that we had both heard it. And we also realized that it wasn't the other. We heard it, that same terrible voice, that same whisper, and we were both hit with the same terrible fear. My mother turned and stared at us in confusion. We realized she'd heard nothing at all. I remember the elevator doors opening and us running out. I was shaking and crying and trying to explain to our mom what had just happened, but she just looked bewildered. She truly hadn't heard a thing.
I came across this house as I was doing research for something to talk about today, and while it's probably one of the most beautiful houses I've ever seen, the history behind it makes me never want to step foot inside of it ever. The original owner of the house was John Soden, and he built it because he wanted to have a place to host parties and entertain guests, but he also wanted it to be kind of different. So he hired Lloyd Wright, who was the oldest son to Frank Lloyd Wright, who was a famous architect back in the day. Now, this house is super strange. I mean, it's not like your typical house. You kind of walk into like a cave-like place, and it's very Maya-inspired, I guess you could say. Not I guess you could say. It's heavily inspired by the Mayan temples that you see in Mexico. Now, Soden only lived in this house for a couple of years, and people think that he left the house because of the negative critiques that were coming from the house, and it would exchange several times. and that was until 1945. In 1945, Dr. George Hodell would buy this property. Now, this is where the history of this house gets very creepy. George Hodell was the prime suspect in the Black Dahlia case. It is widely believed that the case of the Black Dahlia, what happened to the Black Dahlia, happened inside this house. In fact, George Hodell, his son, became a private investigator and believes that he is the person that took the Black Dahlia's life. But his son doesn't believe that it just ended there. He thinks that the doctor did this to several women in this basement and that they're buried in the backyard of this house. He believes that he buried the bodies of several women in the backyard of this house and also in the basement before fleeing the country in 1950. Now, there have been claims that cadaver dogs have been used on this property and that they did indicate that there were human remains buried somewhere on the yard, but no excavations have been made. They haven't actually or officially found anything. But many people have claimed to have been haunted by different presences while there, especially women, which makes you think that maybe there is something there. People have reported seeing ghostly figures of women just kind of wandering the halls of this place. So what do you think? Do you think that this house could actually be haunted by some of the women whose lives were apparently taken here? Or is it all just fake and none of it's been proven, so it's all not true? What are your thoughts? Let me know down in the comments and follow for more spooky things.
There's a creator on here, I'll put her name on the screen. She made a video talking about a study that was done regarding researchers who went inside of prisons across 9 Latin American countries and sat down to conduct 97 interviews with men convicted of murdering their wives. She cited her sources, which were not only the results of that specific study, but many others. I read them and now I'm sharing because there is a pattern in these relationships beginning from their earliest stages leading all the way up to the murders. And hearing about it and realizing how common some of these things are, knowing what it led to, at least in these cases, is so scary. So the thing about this topic, at least in my personal opinion, is that when a man murders his wife, it's often talked about as if it was unpredictable, as if it came out of nowhere. A man snapped, things went too far, and nobody saw it coming. That is not what the research says, but shockingly, or perhaps not, the pattern of the warning signs, they are not physical, they are more psychological or emotional. In 2002, Lundy Bancroft published Why Does He Do That?, a book that he spent over 15 years working on by directly speaking to thousands of men in counseling groups. What he conducted was that their behavior was not caused by anger issues, stress, or mental illness. Instead, he found that it stems from a mindset of entitlement, of men who believe that they have the right to control their partners and they choose tactics to enforce that control. He described the anatomy as a tree, saying it, quote, grows from attitudes and values, not feelings. The roots are ownership, the trunk is entitlement, and the branches are control, end quote. And that is what makes it hard before it happens to say, yes, this man is going down the path that will likely lead him to murdering his wife, because these men do sometimes show good qualities, including times of kindness, warmth, humor, especially in the early stages of the relationship. The man may be adored by all of his family and friends. He may have a successful work life and have no problems with his mental health, but it's the possessiveness that is at the core of his mindset. On some level, he feels that he owns his partner and therefore has the right to treat her as he sees fit. And the deeper the relationship gets, the worse it tends to become. 5 years after Lundy Bancroft's book, socialist Evan Stark took the framework even further. In his 2007 book, Coercive Control, Stark defined coercive control as a course of malicious conduct over time in which a person uses both violent and non-violent means to secure dominance. The tactics include threats, intimidation and stalking, isolation, humiliation and manipulation, micromanagement and control over money and other basic necessities. And crucially, Stark described coercive control as a liberty crime. Not a crime of physical injury, but a crime that strips a woman of her family, her friends, her freedom, and everything that makes her her. And by the way, I think a lot of this isn't groundbreaking information. I feel like we have heard these things before, but it's interesting to see it from like more of a scientific point of view, I guess, like from a study that has actual research behind it. Anyway, he stated that that kind of control makes the victim feels like she has no outside to escape to, because the supposed safe place is her home, her relationship, her children, her family, her husband. Yet when the safe place is also the dangerous place, say for example your home, it makes it hard for the brain to identify what is danger and what is not, leading female victims to just feel like they're entrapped and alone. In 2021, Professor Jane Mongtong Smith published In Control, Dangerous Relationships and How They End in Murder. Jane is a former police officer and professor of public protection who spent years analyzing intimate partner. Her central argument was that murderers do not just snap and lose control. Her research led to the creation of an 8-stage timeline, laying out identifiable stages in which coercive relationships escalate to murder. The 8 stages are a history of control or stalking, not necessarily a criminal history, but a mindset and a tendency to dominate. The commitment whirlwind, where everything from the first meeting moves at an unhealthy, fast pace. Living with control, a trigger, escalation, a change in thinking, planning, and finally the murder. She makes it painstakingly clear that these are not isolated incidents, nor are they crimes of passion where someone just lost it. They are deliberately, they are well thought out. And an intimate partner. Victims are overwhelmingly women, 82% of them. Men are significantly more likely to murder their wives than women are to murder their husbands. And out of these 8 stages, the one that stands out to me the most is stage 6, the change in thinking, because that is when a person, often facing either separation, divorce, or the loss of his sense of control, shifts from trying to control his partner to planning to end her life. It does not look like violence from the outside. It actually often looks calm, like withdrawal, like he has accepted things, but he has accepted nothing. His way of thinking is changing and then leading into planning. In 2003, Dr. Jacqueline Campbell published the results of a study regarding men who murder their wives. That study spanned 11 cities. It compared 220 women who had been murdered by their partners and over 300 women who were currently in toxic, unhealthy relationships. What Campbell found were clear, measurable, predictable risk factors, things that, when present, dramatically increase the likelihood that a man would murder. The risk factors included previous threats with a weapon, stalking, having a stepchild in the home, women telling their controlling partners that they plan to leave. And in regards to women telling their controlling partner that they want to leave, the study showed that only about half of the women who were murdered were able to accurately assess that they were at risk of losing their life, meaning that only half of them made it aware that they were afraid of their partners, versus the other half, who were the women that didn't say anything or didn't try to leave, even if they did think that they could be in danger. The reason for that being is that they believed that leaving can often feel like the most dangerous thing that you can do. Then there's the May 2025 study in which researchers conducted 97 open-ended interviews with incarcerated men in Argentina, Bolivia, Brazil, Chile, Colombia, Honduras, Mexico, Paraguay, and Venezuela. That study was published and it made a lot of researchers just pause for a moment, not because the findings were entirely surprising, but because of how specific they were. The researchers that took part in this study had gone inside of prisons themselves to speak to the men that had been convicted of murdering their wives face to face. That study was titled Flying Under and Through the Radar, and putting information collected from that showed, again, a very detailed, disturbing pattern. And I feel like I'm kind of repeating myself, but part of the purpose of the analysis was to examine the chronological development of these relationships, tracing each case from its earliest stages leading to the murders. And again, what was found was that they were not random, impulsive acts, but instead a calculated, this time 7-step playbook used across 9 different countries, different cultures, different languages, with a consistency that you simply can't ignore. These 7 tactics were social isolation, gaslighting, restricting employment, vilifying external threats, creating male peer alliances, body territorializing, and disrupting healthcare access. Let's go through every single one. Social isolation came first, cutting her off from her family, her friends, and anyone who might notice that something was wrong. This checks out directly with what Bancroft identified 2 decades earlier and what Stark described as the structural machinery of coercive control. Gaslighting followed, systematically dismantling her confidence in her own perception. One man from Mexico put it this way, quote, "If you go to the police or you talk to your sister, it's because you don't trust me." So in a single sentence, he reframed her seeking help as an act of betrayal. She was not a woman in danger reaching out to her sister. Instead, he made her feel like she was being a disloyal wife. This is gaslighting in its most dangerous form because it doesn't just confuse the victim. It pretty much just closes every single door that she might try to open to get out. Restricting employment, that meant that a woman had no financial independence. No money means no independence, and no independence means no escape. These men didn't want their wives working, not because they were providers, but because financial dependence was a cage. A woman who cannot pay for a bus ticket, a hotel room, a lawyer, cannot leave. Next is vilifying external threats. So framing every potential helper, every neighbor, every friend, every relative as an enemy, preemptively discrediting anyone who might try to intervene or later testify against the man. Which leads us into what research has described as among the most significant male peer alliances. All of the men spoke about receiving male support, whether it was telling a friend about how terrible they were to their wives or just creating close relationships with male friends who would take the man's side over the women's if need be. One man from Argentina, 40 years old, described it plainly, saying that his friend knew about how terrible he was to his wife, but because the friend knew, he also knew that if the wife was to make a formal claim, they would both be facing consequences. So instead, the friend took his side. If the wife would have gone to the authorities, both of them stood to lose. So both of them worked together to make sure that she never got the opportunity to report it. His friend then helped him murder his wife. Body territorializing came next, typically escalating later in the relationship, controlling what she wore, where she went, whether she could leave the house or not, controlling everything that had to do with her own body. And finally, disrupting healthcare access. One man from Chile, aged 41, said that he made his wife feel like her going to the hospital was something that she would be doing just to hurt him. He convinced her that her going to report her injuries meant that she was manipulating him, because then the hospital staff would think that he was a bad guy. Another man from Bolivia said something similar. He told his wife that her going to the hospital would make him feel insecure. And she didn't want to make him feel insecure because then she knew that she would pay for that at home, resulting in her then stopping seeking medical help. In simple terms, the men made themselves the victims in the situation, using reverse psychology to make their wives feel like reporting their injuries meant that they were betraying their husbands, when in reality, what they were doing was making sure that anyone who could have helped them in the healthcare system never saw her. So what all of this tells us is that the path and the pattern that leads to men murdering their wives is not a clear one, and a lot of times it's not a physical one. It shows up in jealousy, ownership, entitlement, isolation, financial control, use of children as leverage, and the belief that his partner's life is theirs to control. And more oftentimes than not, it also comes with the support from other men, or men who just choose to look the other way. Crazy. And by the way, I'm not making this video to be like, I hate men. There are good men in the world. I love my dad. I love my fiance. Good men exist. True love in a marriage does exist. I just thought this was so fascinating and so scary. But that is all I have. Let me know your thoughts on this. And yeah, thank you for spending time with me today. Hope you guys are having the best day. If not, go do something to make it the best day. Make somebody happy, and I will see you in my next video. Massive kiss on the forehead to every single one of you.
Women on Tinder literally only want one thing. At the time, I'd had a nose ring, which made him think that I was just an attention seeker and uninterested in nice guys like him. But to his surprise, I messaged him first. He had been on Tinder for 8 years and had never had a single match, because he thought that Western women just really had it out for him. So he had taken me to see a film, and while he stood by the concessions with his jumbo popcorn and extra large Sprite, he was waiting for me to go buy my own ticket. Yeah, the cashier gave us a interesting look. And afterwards, I let him take me back to his place, where he flexed his Vortex Tab 90M keyboard, and the LEDs on it really made my eyes sparkle. Then he noticed some tattoos that I had, and he made a mental note to mention them as flaws on our second date. But then he asked me, are those Norse symbols? Because he had recognized them from God of War. So I told him they are, and he asked what possessed me to get them. So I told him I'm a witch. And he just chuckled, because he thought that I was in a Harry Potter, and he thought it was so lucky that we had met, because now he could introduce me to more sophisticated entertainment like Dune or Rick and Morty. He went to open his mouth to say something, but I just snapped my fingers, and he flew across the room like he was attached to a bungee cord and was pinned against the wall. So he's screaming all, what's going on, blah, blah, and I'm just strolling across the room, place my hand on his chest, and tell him, I'm taking your soul. And he's like, my soul? Like, pipe down, it'll be over soon. And he's like, no, tell me why. So I tell him that souls have great power and I need them to produce spells. So I wander around and harvest them from people that nobody will miss. And he goes, but why take mine? I don't answer. He asked if he would die, and I explained, you'll be a ghost. You know, like without a soul, you'll be just meat. So people only notice you when looking directly at you. But the second they turn away, you'll just be completely wiped from their memory. Finally, a little silver wisp came out of his chest and into my hand, and I ushered it into a vial. And then he goes, you can't take my soul. I have too much to live for. So I say, how's this? Tell me one thing that you did in the past 2 months that doesn't involve video games or calling women derogatory names, and you can keep your crummy soul. And that's the story of how he became a ghost. So now he just wanders around, dead to the world. Fortunately for him, though, he discovered that while playing video games online, his teammates could still notice and react to his avatar, and people could still, see his Reddit posts and Twitch stuff like that.
So, really, not much has changed.